Hello. Oh, there we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, January 13th, and I just want to note that Board Member Fox is present via teleconference, and because of that, all votes tonight will be done via roll call. Superintendent Schultz, would you like to review our agenda for the night?
Thank you. So tonight we have a presentation from our multilingual program, and we will hear from the members of the audience. We have a series of items on consent. And then for discussion, the school board will present the strategic directions as we continue to develop the strategic plan. Discussion about our enrollment report. We have a discussion on student travel and a discussion on policy 601. For action, we'll be approving the budget parameters we will use to develop the 2021 budget, and also ECC renovation recommendation, policy updates, and then also action on policy 601 that was discussed at the last meeting. So that will be it. Other information with the enrollment report, and then any leadership updates and committee reports.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the January 6th organizational meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the January 6th organizational meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll now vote by roll call to approve the January 6th minutes. Aye.
Fox? Aye. Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Wallington?
Aye.
The January 6th meeting minutes are approved. Now moving on, we have a presentation of our EL program, and so I'd like to invite up Randy Smasal and Uli Rodriguez, and I believe we have quite a few students that are going to come up as well. So welcome, students. Thank you for coming out tonight. So I'd like to welcome you to the board meeting for your presentation and present.
Thank you, Chair Ellenberg, Superintendent Schultz, our school board and community members. Very excited to be presenting this evening. My name is Randy Smasal. I'm Director of Teaching and Learning, and sitting beside me here is Uli Rodriguez, and Uli is our multilingual English learner coordinator. And I'll ask Uli to introduce our teachers who are here this evening, and then our teachers are going to introduce some of our students who are joining us as well.
I'd like to introduce Carrie Eisenbarth. She's an ESL teacher at Creek Valley Elementary, and Natalia Buckner. She's an ESL teacher at Edina High School. Thanks for joining us.
So the report that you are about to receive, or the presentation you're about to receive, is going to provide an overview of ML programming in Edina Public Schools, and included in that presentation are some definitions commonly used in the schools, a summary of our multilingual enrollment trends over time, and some critical elements of English learner program compliance, and an articulation of some future needs. There's no decision being asked of the board this evening. This is just for information at this time. And we would ask that the board just consider, as you're listening to this presentation, how our current ML programming has provided success for many ML learners and how future needs will need to be addressed. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Uli to talk about some of the terminology that is used in our schools with this program.
In order to have a better understanding of our multilingual English learners, I think it's important to get familiarized with the common terminology used in public education. And this is just a list of some of the most common terms that we use in the ESL ML world. An LEP or Limited English Proficient was the old term used to describe English learners. The problem with this term was that it promoted a deficit instead of an asset mindset among educators. ELL or ESL, or ELL, stands for English language learners or English learners, and this one replaced LEP. This is a term used at the federal and state level for reporting purpose. Another terminology that's important to know is RAELs or RAELs. These are recently arrived English learners or newcomers. SLIFEs are students with limited or interrupted formal education. These are students who have at least 2 years or less of schooling compared to their English learners and function at least 2 years below expected grade level in reading and math. And they also may be pre-literate in their native language. Some of us life may come from refugee camps. LTELs, or long-term English learners, these are students who have been enrolled in American schools for more than 6 years and are not making progress towards English proficiency, and usually are struggling academically due to limited English skills. ML, or multilingual learner, is the most recommended term and the one we use at the district because it recognizes students' home languages and cultures as an asset. ML monitors, or monitors, are those multilingual learners who have met exit criteria and are being monitored for at least 2 years as required by the Every Child Succeeds Act, or ESSA, to ensure proficiency is sustained after instruction ends. And ESL, or English as a Second Language, is a term used to describe the professional field, the language program, the classes, and the teacher's licensure. For today's presentation, we're going to use EL and ML, or multilingual learners, interchangeably. A frequently question that teachers and parents ask us is, how long does it take to learn English? The answer depends on many factors. Among some of the factors is the student's home language literacy skills, the quality of instruction, and the type of English the student is learning. Basically, there are two kinds of Englishes, or two kinds of English. The first one is called Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, or BICS, or Social or Conversational English. This is the everyday English used to order food, talk about the weather, your favorite food, your favorite artist, last weekend, etc. On the other hand, there is the English for academic purposes, or CALP. This is the English our students need to be able to be successful in school. It's the English of language arts, science, social studies, and math. The research on second language research says that it may take between 5 to 7 years for a student to reach academic English proficiency. And it could even take longer for those students who don't have strong literacy skills in their home language. That's why heritage language programs are so important. A very important fact to highlight about the multilingual learner population is that it's the fastest growing population in Minnesota. Our district has experienced a significant growth as well, as you can see in the chart. We went from 320 ML students in 2017 to 465 at this point. The number is expected to grow at the end of the school year because our numbers tend to grow between January and April. A very critical fact to know about multilingual English learner is that school districts have an obligation under the federal Every Student Succeed Act, or ESSA, which is the reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind, to ensure that English learners have equal access to a high-quality education and the opportunity to achieve their full academic potential. In order to be in compliance with ESSA, the Minnesota Department of Education has provided school districts 8 critical elements to focus on. The first one asks districts to use standardized procedures to identify and exit English language learners. The second one highlights the importance of having an effective language instruction program that supports the language development of MLs. The third critical element requires districts to provide all their staff ongoing professional development on cultural competency and strategies to effectively support English language learners. Element number 4 asks to develop a plan to reach out to multilingual families to include and engage them in the education of their children. The fifth element requires districts to be accountable for the academic English progress of English language learners. Element 6 asks districts to be fiscally responsible and use Title III funds exclusively for the support of English learners. Number 7 asks districts to provide consultation and instructional services to non-public schools that accept Title III funds. Currently, the schools that are receiving Title III services from our district are Avail Academy and Our Lady of Grace. And the last critical element to highlight is the requirement to monitor the progress of those students who have exited the program and make sure that they are being successful without receiving English language instruction. We currently have 172 monitor students. This number is in addition to the 465 students that are receiving direct instruction. Some elements we would like to highlight today is our work on professional development, family engagement, and progress towards English proficiency. In the professional development area, our department has been organizing different activities to provide mainstream teachers with learning opportunities to improve their instructional skills to work with multilingual English learners. Some of those initiatives include partnering with Hamline University and their English language mainstream project, or ELM project, to provide ESL coaching and consultation. We have also been partnering with the University of Wisconsin River Falls to provide training for math teachers. And we have been presenting at our professional development days and school staff meetings. To make sure multilingual families feel welcome and engaged in the children's education, we have partnered with the Equity, Technology, and Community departments to organize a variety of family engagement activities. These events have been well attended and well received by our multilingual families. Another ESSA critical element we would like to highlight in this report is the importance of being aware of the work that needs to be done to make sure all of our multilingual English learners are making progress toward English proficiency. Although in 2019, 54% of our MLs met or surpassed their growth target on the access test. Access test is the standardized test used in the 37 states part of the WIDA consortium. 46% of them did not meet their target. And in order to reach the state's 2025 goal of helping 85% of MLs meet their growth target on access and make sure that all our multilingual English learners are successful and graduate from high school, we need to create a sense of urgency and work together to develop a vision and an action plan to achieve that goal. Multilingual English learners are a complex and heterogeneous student population with very unique characteristics. This slide captures some of those characteristics. We currently have 465 students receiving direct services. 68% of them are in the elementary and 32% are in the secondary. 19% of them are receiving special ed services. 5% are in the gifted and talented and young scholar program, and 51% of them receive free and reduced lunch. 172 students have exited the program and are now, or exited the program last year, and are now in a 2-year monitor window. When we add the number of students served to those being monitored, the total number is 637. A very important asset of our MLs is their home language. More than 60 different languages are spoken by our district multilingual learners, and being Somali and Spanish the most common languages. In terms of graduation, 86% of MLs graduated from the high school in 4 years in 2008. 54% of MLs met their growth target on access, as we probably learned. And in terms of MCA proficiency, 25% of them show proficiency in reading and 32% proficiency in math.
At this time, we'll transition to Carrie to talk a little bit about our resources that are provided for MLs.
Thanks, Randy. As an ESL department, there are several challenges that we face to accelerating the academic English of our ML students. One is that we have limited resources or time to be in compliance with the ESSA requirements that Uli mentioned. Elementary teachers in particular are facing a high student-to-teacher ratio of 40-1, making the achievement gap more difficult to narrow. Another challenge is building the capacity to collaborate into our daily schedules so that we can provide classroom teachers with ideas and strategies to support the MLs in their content areas. Go to the next one. Okay. One way we hope to meet these challenges is by adjusting the teacher-to-student ratio in our elementary buildings to 25-1. With the current ratio of 40-1, we have no time to address students' academic needs outside of our classroom walls. But by pushing into classrooms outside of their ESL group time, we can provide more individualized instruction to newcomers or dual identified students and students not meeting their growth targets. If one of our goals as a district is to improve the achievement gap for ML students, then improving the ML student to teacher ratio is key because it will allow elementary EL teachers more time per student and time to collaborate and or co-teach with classroom teachers.
So, Carrie, let's talk a little bit about what that day looks like for you in terms of workload and your schedule and the kinds of tasks. We can see some of those presented up here on the screen, but can you speak a little bit to the time and support that is needed to support our teachers in doing this work to meet the needs of our students?
Sure. So actually right now, it's really hard for me to imagine completing all of those ESSA requirements. I wish I had my schedule to hold up for you right now because it's just jam-packed. Every single moment is with students as much as we possibly can. In particular, when we have a newcomer student with very low English proficiency, that student needs to be seen at least an hour a day. And sometimes I need to complete that hour in conjunction with my colleague. And so even though they are one student, it's like they need double the time. And so that's a real challenge with that 40-1 ratio when we do have high need students. When a new student does happen to arrive to our building, I have to cancel a group in order to give a new student a test to see if they qualify for English or not, and then score that test, and then send home a letter to the parents and call the parents and let them know and add them to the schedule. And it just, if we had a little bit of time built into our daily schedules for all of those things and for collaborating with our colleagues, we could be much more effective and help kids get out of that achievement gap and narrow it. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, but your experience is so valuable for the community to hear about. And one of the challenges is how do we support our teachers in meeting the needs of our EL learners. And what we're going to be looking at just internally is how we provide that time and support for our teachers. Some of these tasks that you see maybe are a little bit more like clerical in nature, and then some of them are specific tasks that the teachers have to do. And so for us to just continue to refine and define what does that work day look like as we're trying to meet these new ESSA requirements as part of our internal work. But when we look at some other districts and how they have solved this, they have literally looked at the schedule of the EL teachers and adjusted that schedule so that they have part of their instructional day is the paperwork requirement that now goes along with this position. So it's something that we just need to look at internally, and we're making the board aware of that kind of work that is done in the schools. At this time, thank you, Carrie. At this time, I would ask Natasha to come up, and maybe you can introduce the students. And I don't know if we're starting with Mohammed? No. He's not here? Okay, so we will continue with the students that are here. And you take the mic and you run the show. And part of what we want to do for the community is help the community understand what the student experience has been like and how it has impacted them, and what their experience at Edina Public Schools with these services are. So Natasha?
Thank you, Randy. My name is Natalia Wegner, and I teach EL at the high school. And a few of my students will come and talk about their experiences. So this is Bashka Pasquale.
Hi, my name is Bashka Pasquale. I was born in Somalia and grew up in Kenya. So moving to USA, you moving to USA was kind of fun, but when I came here, it was so hard to understand, like to adapt a new language and new people. I didn't have friends. So when I came to Edina, I had my classes, but I didn't have EL. So I had to go to like normal classes. I didn't understand anything, and I was confused. Then when I talked with my counselor, she puts me EL, and I had to develop and learn more English. I wasn't speaking like this. I had to learn more, and now I have other classes, and I made new friends. I was able to play for the high school soccer team, and we won the state champion. So EL helped me a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Yunso Chance.
Hello, my name is Yunso Chang, and I came from South Korea in 2015, and now I've been in USA about 5 years now, and I can still imagine my first day of school in USA because it was really horrible because new people, new language, and new cultures. So I had to deal with all of the problems. So, it was really hard. I couldn't even open my mouth to speak, and I was really shy, and I couldn't talk to the other people in English. So but I kept, learning English in ELL program, and I kept learning and learning, and this really helped me because, now I can understand better, and I can now deal with other classes like math, science, and also like social studies. So whenever, I struggle with that subjects, I always go to my EL teacher to help me to understand. And now my, EL teacher, Miss Wen, always helped me to understand better and try to, do my best jobs. So now I'm, about to get in college, and it's really helpful to me. And, I couldn't even talk this much because I was really shy boy and didn't know any English. Now I can, now I teach martial art to little kids, teenager, and adults in English. And yeah, it's because also I have, I put a lot of effort and I, work really hard. But still, if Miss Werner was not here for me to help, I couldn't even do anything. So, thank you.
Okay. And this is Esther Effiong.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Esther Ifyong, and I'm from Nigeria. I first came to the United States in 2017 for a Model United Nations conference. I presented my school in Nigeria here, and then I went back to my country, Nigeria, and then I came back 2018. And when I came, I decided to stay, and I'm now a junior at Edina High School. When I first came, I got selected as one of the ELL students. And so I had low esteem when I came. I was so shy. I could hardly present in class because I was afraid of my accent. I thought my accent was gonna cause so many racial discrimination in school. But then becoming an ELL student really helped me in building my self-esteem. I could stand in class and present. And I would take Model UN debate, speech, and I'm also a peer tutor. So I would really, really love ELL to be a really, really great program for kids who come from different countries because it's gonna help build their self-esteem as it did for me. So I would really, really love ELL to still be there for other students. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another former student, Kanita Kane. Kanita graduated 2 years ago from Edina High School.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kanita. I'm from Mauritania. I moved to the U.S., I would say 2016, July. And then I went to Edina High School. I was a junior that year. Honestly, I would say ESSA helped me a lot because I remember the first time I went to my physical universe class. It was like 8 in the morning. So I had to sit in that class wondering like what's going on. Because I had no idea what was going on with like what I'm studying and stuff. Cause like it was just like so complicated and weird. And I'm looking at people, I'm like, okay, is someone here gonna speak French? Cause like back home, people would say, yeah, French is like international, like everybody, like wherever you go, people would speak French. I'm like, okay, then maybe like English, I don't need it. But like moving here and sitting on my physical universe class, I realized that I needed English. So I remember coming back to Miss Wagner's class. I'm like, Miss Wagner, I do not want to go back to that class. So I cried all day, and then I went to my counsel. I'm like, I want to change that class. But my dad's like, nope, you're not changing it. You're not going to give up. I'm like, well, I don't want to do it. He's like, nope, you're going to keep growing, keep going. You're here to learn. So I kept doing that class, and then I had to, like, sometimes I have to go to Miss Wagner. I'm like, Miss Wagner, can you please explain this? And then she would explain everything to me. And then I would always like stay after school with Mr. Wyland to help me. And then I kept doing that. And then all the time, like, I didn't have friends, honestly. I did not. I had to sit like in Miss Wagner class for lunch, or sometime I would go and then just sit with like some people that I knew like in ESL. Let's say like one of my friends, I mean, we're still very good friends. She's not here today because she couldn't come. Her name is Nasra. And then like they helped us like a lot to succeed and stuff. And then also that they helped us make friends because like everyone was nice to each other, and then they were talking to people nice. And then like I feel like I had like a second family, honestly. Because like you can come and then like, okay, Miss Wagner, this, and then she's there to help you every time, whenever you need it without complaint. And also, I remember, let's say maybe not 2 years ago, because I came to us, or maybe 2 years ago. Okay, I came to like school board meeting when Matthew Fox was like running, because my dad is Booker Kane, I don't know. So we were here, and I talked to him. I'm like, I think you guys should do something for ESL students, because like I felt like some of them were like segregated, honestly. That's just my opinion though, because like when we were doing link crew, I was part of it, and then like all the other classes had like link crew members in their classes, but ESL did not. And then they didn't have a class that time. They were like in a club space by like the second floor, and then Miss Wagner was there, but like most of the time they would have like a link crew leader and a teacher. And then I came out of my link crew because there was like 3 people in my link crew. I'm like, wait, you guys don't have things? She's like, no. Like, wow. And then I came here, and then I talked about it, like maybe like they should not discriminate other people, because I feel like that is kind of like you just like staying in one place. I felt like we should have gone to like other places and like make more friends with like out of ESL, so that we can understand better the culture, and also like understand better the language. I think there's like some changes that should be done just to help like those students improve in their, like if they want to succeed in life and stuff. And then we live here, and then some of them are really good students. They just might not understand the language, which is like a hard part for a lot of us. For myself, it was. But luckily, I lived with a family that we speak English at home, which helped me too. Because like if I didn't understand something and there's no my teacher there, I would just go home and talk to my dad and my family, and then they would just help me. Okay, this is how you're gonna do it, and this is how it worked and work. And then I just like kept doing what I had to do. But even though I graduated, I always like come like every year. I come to Miss Wagner and just check in and stuff. Because I still feel like even like I'm out of Edina High School, but I still feel home there. So, thank you.
Now you're in college.
Yes, I'm in college now.
Thank you, Kanita. Thank you.
Okay. So in closing, I just wanted to highlight some of the hopes and dreams of my students at Creek Valley. One of my students, who is not pictured here, said, "I want to be a lawyer because you can stand up for people." Tonight, we stand up here for her and for all our ML students that have big dreams. Through making the improvements to our ESL department shown here tonight, we are investing in their futures. Thank you.
So I'd like to publicly thank Uli, our teachers, and our talented and fearless students coming up here to speak this evening and tell us your stories, and we so appreciate that and appreciate you. So thank you very much. How about a round of applause to our student speakers? So at this time, that completes our presentation. We'll turn it back over to the school board to see if you have any follow-up questions for our teachers or for Uli or for our students.
I have one question. You had mentioned that the ESSA requirements are coming due very soon. What happens if we fall outside of compliance?
Last year was the full implementation of the ESSA requirements. So basically, districts had 2 years to prepare for all the requirements. So what would happen if you're not in compliance? Well, there have been some districts that, because not many of our students' parents know the system, they don't know how to advocate for the student. They relax and they know they're not in compliance, and that's when lawsuits happens. There was a group of parents in one of the districts in the metro area that got sued because of not being in compliance with ESSA. And there's still a lot of work to do in that, and there's still a lot of myths out there about how English is learned. There are people who think that the best way to learn English is by putting students into mainstream, and that's not what the research says. Like the research says, if you're level 1 or level 2, you need at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours of day of instruction. So what would happen is we can get sued.
Thank you.
Hi, I had 2 quick questions, but well, I don't know if they're quick or not. But first, I wanted to thank the students for coming up here and speaking about your experiences. And just from my perspective, your hard work and your perseverance will only pay you dividends later in life. And I really appreciate you coming here and being brave enough to tell us about everything that you've done. So thank you very much for that. My questions, the first question I had was, from your perspective, are there better ways to measure proficiency towards math and language arts than the MCA, given that those are done in English? So my basic question is, how can we identify students that have high aptitude in these areas but might get marked and needing special education services, or that they have learning challenges when it's really a language barrier issue? And are there better ways that we can identify students that might, for example, be gifted and talented, or actually be very highly proficient but have a language barrier?
Yeah, to identify gifted and talented, what the research, or even the Minnesota Department of Education, is to say we do not, the language shouldn't be a factor to determine if you are gifted or not. And there's a variety of resources, like you said, use nonverbal tools, use students' native language to measure the potential that students have. Our students still need to take MCA, and as language teachers are not, we look at MCA scores and we pay attention to the score, but what we're really worried about more is the language growth of the students. Because if you're not proficient in English, everything is going to be hard. Like science is going to be, math is going to, and you're not going to do well on MCA. And the state is they're aware of that our students might not do well on MCA. And if you look at the scores at state level, they're very low. And because our students are still, some of our students are still in the process of learning English. So I think everything has to be done in a context. Like the way I would do it, well, if a student shows proficiency, let's say the student is exited from the program, they show 4.5 on access. Now that the student is proficient, we should see that proficiency reflected on MCA scores. Like we should start seeing the colors change more towards green, blue, and show proficiency. So are there better ways to measure content? Well, we probably need to design our own. But I think what we're more worried about as language specialists is language, the academic language. How can we accelerate the language of our students in 2-3 years so that we can see that growth also in the academic content and the standardized tests? Yep.
I was going to say too that on the MCAs, on the math test, the students are allowed a dictionary in their native language, but a 10-page dictionary of math terms for a 4th grader is quite cumbersome and not very effective, to be honest. So there are helps, and also on the MAPS test and the math maps and math MCAs, there's a feature where they can click on a word and hear their native language, but that's only available in Mandarin and Somali and Spanish, I believe. So, and with 60 different languages, they don't all have that feature. And on the math, it also will read it to them, the entire text in English. So there's that. And then your other point about trying to identify like when it's language and when it's special education, that's a very, very tricky subject to answer. And you kind of have to take it on a student-by-student basis. And I prefer to look at them long-term, and often we have our students long-term, so we have that advantage of having them from kindergarten through 2nd grade and look at they've plateaued, they're not going anywhere, what's going on, and so we can take that historical data when we've had them for multiple years and we know them so well, and so you really have to look at it on a student-by-student basis. So
there's I met with the school psychologists this morning, and we made a plan to collaborate more to answer those questions. The U.S. Department of Education gives us some tools that we need to follow that help us determine when a student is showing some signs of struggle, like why a student behaves in certain ways. Is this a student because of a behavior need, or is it because of language? So we have some resources available. It's just a matter of creating a plan to provide these resources to the teachers and make sure that nobody is identified for special ed services because of a language need. So it's always it's a challenge, because there are times when a student may show those signs, but if we follow the resources, the procedures, then we'll be able to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No?
Mine's more of a comment to the teachers. I just want to give you a huge thank you. It's pretty apparent that not only you two, but I'm guessing all of our ML teachers across the district are just creating not only this great learning environment, but an amazing support system. And so I just want to thank you on behalf of us.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that comment. I want to thank you all for coming and for sharing your stories. I also want to say that I'm heading up the Legislative Action Committee, and in our review of the platform that the board is going to review tonight, we decided to include an item on, again, additional funding for ESL. And so I'm just wondering if any of the students want to join us in our advocacy. They should talk to their coordinators and then get in touch with me, and I will tell them when they can show up at the state capitol so we can try to get some more money for them. Thank you.
It's a great idea. Yeah. Anything else from anyone? Well, thank you both very much, and thank you for coming. And again, thank you, teachers and students. I appreciate the presentation and information. Thank you. Sorry, we can't do questions, but feel free to email the board, or we can answer it afterwards, or, great, perfect, thank you. Now we're going to move to hearings from members of the audience, and thank you for everyone for coming to speak, though I think it's only one person, so I need to be more flexible in my speech that I have here. So I just want to reaffirm our commitment as a board to welcoming community input, and remind everyone that if you have a complaint about individual employees, board members, or students in the district, please direct any of those comments to the appropriate site administrator, the superintendent, or submit them in writing to the board. And the board typically does not respond to or have discussion on any topics presented, but questions raised during presentations will receive follow-up as directed by the board. I would also like to remind all speakers that your presentations are limited to 3 minutes. When you have 15 seconds left of your 3 minutes, I'll prompt you to wrap up your discussion. So we have one speaker tonight, who is Ms. Pamela Balabushka-Ray, if you would like to come up. And I won't start your timer until you're actually sitting and ready to speak. So thank you for coming to speak.
Hi. Okay, I have so much more to add now that I've heard you all, so thank you. Yeah, I'm Pamela Balabushka-Ray. I have 2 kids at EPS. I have a lot on my mind. First, I want to thank the board for voting to bring Policy 601 back to discussion. At the meeting on January 6th. I think that's the responsible decision at this time. I'm really happy to see a clearer and more concise strategic plan that includes whole student support. Look forward to hearing more about how the district will invest in our students' mental health and analyze structural factors that create stress. I'm adding tonight that I heard from these students that you all need support. And what I have to say, I'm advocating for all of you as well. You're amazing, and you work so hard, and you deserve support from EPS and that investment. During the January 6th board meeting, it became very apparent to me that there continues to be confusion about the scope of 601 and a lack of understanding by the former policy committee about how the budget for teaching and learning works. It's absolutely fair for the community and the board to assert that policy 601 will offset other programs. We just don't know what that price tag could be yet. I spoke about the need for more investment in student support services at another meeting. It isn't just a constant adult demand for more rigorous academics that leads to stress in students, though I believe it is a significant factor. It's unforeseen circumstances, like in our family, a cancer diagnosis. The support staff and teachers have been amazing with our family, but our use of their time simply uses up the time that they have for other families who are equally deserving. They need more staff. I can assure you the very, very last thing on our minds and our family is investing in rigor in the classroom. A balanced investment in all of our students is what is called for at this time. All of them, the ones in this room and everyone else, not just gifted and talented. It is very clear that this policy needs to be revisited and addressed in a responsible way. Thanks.
Thank you for coming, Pamela. We're going to move on to our consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes, the vending.
Okay, I'll remove the EHS vending machine agreement from the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We will now vote by roll call to approve the consent agenda. Aye.
Fox?
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson? Shaw?
Aye.
Valentina?
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the EHS vending machine agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there questions about the vending machine agreement?
Okay, and I wanted to apologize to John. I didn't get quite this question to him on this earlier, but when I look at vending machines and I see single-use bottles, plastic bottles in the vending machines, I always think, well, is there a way that we can somehow make responsible choices more either easy, or I'm not going to be able to choose the words right now correctly, but I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that we could look into our vending contracts so that we could possibly add a charge to each purchase, and the school could use that additional charge for sustainability projects. I'm kind of trying to put on a tax on the use of these types of single-use products that affect our earth and will be around for 300 years, and use that money both as a deterrent for purchasing single-use bottles, and also possibly use the money for, you name it, LED lighting or something else that might be an offset.
Chair Allenberg, Director Jones, that wasn't part of the bid process that we did, even though we're recommending Midwest vending tonight. It's certainly something that we can look at in the future, working with Midwest vending if that's what the board would like.
So do you have some time to look into this before the contract has to be done?
The board can do whatever they'd like. They can reject this contract tonight, and we can rebid it out with those parameters. It's up to the board.
Is it typical to have those parameters? Like, I don't want to end up having no vending machines after this. Do you think that this is a possibility?
We'll still have vending machines because the current vendor is the vendor that we're recommending tonight, so they're not going to be moving out any machines. We're also going to add some machines in some certain spots. So nothing will change necessarily if we go out and rebid it with these specifications.
I think the question is for the rest of the board, is this something you're interested in pursuing and delaying this contract?
Well, to satisfy your larger concern, Ellen, could we just add 5 cents to the charge for a beverage? And would that affect the bids?
That cost would just be included in the cost for a student to purchase the product.
So then what you're desiring, we could do apart from the bid?
Yeah, but actually, and I asked this question one way once, but I would actually prefer to ask the students if this is something that they would want, because it would have, the impact would be on the buildings, right? So I think that it's something very important to me, but maybe it's something that Project Earth could look into to say whether or not that the high school this is something that is meaningful for the high school students. I would prefer it to not be from the board that this is coming to you, saying this is what that now you have to charge extra. I'd rather have it be approved through the buildings.
I think Principal Beaton has something that he would like to add here.
Don? I think the question is more about what we sell in the machines. I think more than the additional tax. So I mean, if we had an initiative like we're having discussions with Chartwells about bottles and composting and things like that. Like, do we really want to offer things that we can't recycle and compost? So what can we do as a system? So I think it's the same for our vending machines. If we had a conversation about whether we want to be a plastic bottle-free high school, and you just sell snacks, but I'm not sure about adding the cost. There's always a tipping point in these contracts about how much things cost versus the actual sales that you get that come in. So I think a broader conversation about what we put in those machines. All of the products in the machines right now follow the wellness policy about what we can give to kids during the school day, and they've been successful. Kids like their snacks, and they drink the drinks in there that fit the wellness policy, but indeed they are in plastic bottles. So I think a broader conversation about whether we want to do that as a district or as a school in all of our food service and vending machines as well. So.
John, can I ask a quick question? Oh, I'm sorry, Julie, did I interrupt you?
It's okay.
The revenue that's generated from these vending machines at each specific site is then retained at the site, or is it it's the site level, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that raising a price to offset and put it into a separate line item, to me, feels like that could muddy some waters, but that's just my thought on it. And I'm kind of looking at you, Andy, just because you would be the one, at the high school with the most.
I was the catalyst to bring in some of these vending machines into the high school before they were some dormant ones that were owned by Chartwells. And just looking at having any kind of discretionary funding at the high school level. We met with the business office 3 years ago about the wellness policy and put these in place, and it does give a little bit of discretionary funding back to the school that you don't have to have your PTO raise and so on. So I think, again, it's the, when we work with Midwest Vending, they come and they talk to us about the prices that they want to, what do we want to charge? They can charge more, and then more of that money comes back, but if the cost is too high for the products, then they won't necessarily sell. So I think that comes within the contract and coming up with a percentage that they give back to the schools. And the nice part about the contract is they take care of these machines 100% of the time. They track all the data about what's selling. If we're not selling this particular type of product, they take it out. They put something else in that students are interested in. So they're monitoring all of that as well. And they take care of the machines completely. So it's a nice service for us, and it's been pretty successful, at least the process that we put together.
So if I get it right, the buildings themselves get to decide what is sold in the buildings, right? So it's not a district decision.
Right, well, they have a certain amount of products. Midwest Vending says that we can have these types of snacks, and we got those approved to say they fit within the wellness policy of the school district. So we can't sell, root beer floats and candies and things like that. We can't sell during the school day to kids per state law. So it has to fit the health of the kids during the day, sugar-free drinks, water, things like that, snacks that are not high in fat, things like that. So it fits that policy. But in terms of what we choose, sometimes it's depend on demand. So if a lot of students are buying this type of snack, we put more of those type of snacks in the machines.
I just want to add two things. One is I appreciate that you are following the wellness policy in terms of what is offered. I think that is district-wide, and I know that's an effort to do that and to be very intentional about that. So if this was something that we wanted to talk about as a board, to add a sustainability piece to that wellness policy, that might be something that we could consider. And the second thing is I would not feel comfortable passing cost off to the students to add a tax, a sustainability tax to the students that they would have to pay extra to cover that. I think that would be going back to a vendor or being more creative about how we would do that if we were going to try and find a line item. But I'm not comfortable passing that off to the students. So that's it.
Is there any other comment or further questions before we vote on this?
Right. My last comment would be I would encourage the building leads to ask this as a building, their question on where they might stand on the sustainability of selling single serving plastic bottles in their vending machine. And I wanted to add this to the discussion because whenever I see these vending machines, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about, what messages we're sending our students on environmental responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I think it's a good discussion. We'll now vote by roll call to approve the EHS vending machine agreement.
Ellenberg,
Aye.
Fox. Aye. Green,
Aye.
Jones. Aye. Michelson.
Aye.
Shaw.
Aye.
Wallen-Friedman.
Aye.
The EHS vending machine agreement has been approved. Okay, we're now moving on to items up for discussion, and the first item is the strategic plan. I'd like to outline for the community what the document is that we are discussing and potentially approving next month. For those of you that have been following the strategic planning process, or even if you haven't, we had community feedback sessions during October and November. So the board has been working on processing the community feedback and refining the strategic direction to give our administration the direction it needed to create an implementation plan. This document contains a refined mission, vision, values, and belief statements, along with the strategic direction that will serve as a foundation for the administration to build their recommendation for specific tactics on how to achieve these outcomes over the next 1 to 5 years. The document before the board tonight intentionally does not include specific action steps the district will take to implement the strategies and does not include metrics to evaluate those specific action steps. The next step after next month after the document is approved, the board or the administration will draft action steps and metrics for the strategic directions put together by the board. The action steps and metrics will then be approved by the board. The next steps the community will see is the administration making recommendations to the board on how our district will achieve this strategic direction through actionable tactics and outcome measures. This will enable us as a board, administration, and community to ensure the plan is doing what it's supposed to do, which is positively impact our students from an academic, social, emotional, and whole child perspective. I'd like to start the conversation by asking Superintendent Schultz, does this strategic direction document provide you with the information and direction you need to build a clear roadmap of tactics, priorities, and outcome measures for our district for the next 1 to 5 years?
So, thank you, Erica. Yes, I do believe it does. We can deliver on these strategic directions. I think setting strategic direction for education today is complicated. It's very multifaceted. You heard an example of that with multilingual learning. There's a lot happening in our children's world. We need to think about that through what's best for all of them. Our discussions over these many months have vetted a lot of issues and ideas for Edina's children, and I think we really have covered a lot of ground. I'm really proud of this document because it doesn't only represent the importance of Edina's academic excellence, it also represents a really great direction for public education. It recognizes the importance of talent in our students, talent in our staff, our partnerships in the community, and the commitment to teaching Edina kids what it means to be a contributing citizen in Edina, Minnesota, and the country. I know there will be school districts who will use this set of directions as an exemplar for their own public education. Whenever you do strategic planning, there are other ideas or ideas that may not be in the document, but ideas nonetheless that it came out through all the conversations. And some of these are really relevant and tangible, and I want to share some of those in response to your question. As I was part of these conversations, I heard that it's going to be important for us to build multiple pathways of learning for students to achieve their goals. I heard that there has to be a commitment to address and eliminate the disparities in education, especially the achievement gap. We need to have effective and timely interventions for our students who need to be challenged and students who need support to accelerate their knowledge and skill development. We need to have the development within the system that thinks about the whole child, building programs for students and staff that support health and wellness. And our special services staff have begun looking at that already through some of their work in their social and emotional learning. There's a lot of conversation about making the system a preschool through grade 12, developing literacy plan for preschool through grade 12, but also pre-K and literacy and math, and really helping our young learners eliminate those gaps in their learning so they can be successful when they enter into the system. Another commitment that I heard is that we need to look at our magnet programs. Are there relevant themes that we can offer our students across our schools and our programs? Also, the idea of a robust community education program that offers courses and experience of interest to the community is something that we talked a lot about. And also the creation of a data dashboard. How do we find those metrics in the system that give us information about how well we are doing? So I am really excited to present the leadership this strategic direction and begin to build an implementation plan. I would love to bring that to you in March. And I really want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity and giving all of us as leaders the opportunity to help the board build this direction. So yes, Chair Ellenberg, we can deliver on these directions.
Great, thank you. Dr. Schultz, I'd like to open it up to the remaining board for your comments or questions and anything you'd like to discuss.
I just wanted to take a quick minute and commend the incredible amount of work and time and energy that the past board and put forth for almost 2 years to get us to this point. I know it was no small feat and it was a process. My only feedback on the document is I would propose that we would have another work session to just flesh out and make sure that our alignment is consistent from mission all the way down through all our strategy priorities. So I think we did a lot of work in the last 7 days, and I would just like the time to give it a good litmus test. So that's it.
So just for people who are watching, I mean, the board has met a number of times on this, and we actually had a discussion on January 9th, I believe, where we kind of came to this particular draft. So while you don't hear a lot of discussion tonight of this, it's because it's been preceded by quite a number of months of discussion of it.
I do have something. Oh. The strategic plan. So many, if not all of the comments I'm about to make have already been stated at work sessions developing this plan. But it's my belief that the community should also hear my input regarding this document. First, as my colleagues know, I feel that the draft document presented to the community tonight is not specific enough in stating strategic initiatives that respond to the background information we received in the beginning of this process, our surveys, feedback sessions, and SWOT report. The document reads more as a long list of aspirations than a targeted strategic plan. I've advocated for specific measurable outcomes to align with and clearly set directions toward district priorities. Instead, the board has decided to proceed with what is more of a lengthy vision statement. I will give 2 examples of what I mean when I advocate for putting more direct, measurable outcomes in the plan. I do not mean to specify tactics. That's what I would expect from district professionals and in an implementation plan. I'm talking about specific outcomes. For example, the prior draft of the plan that the community saw and responded to had as an outcome achievement gap closed by raising the proficiency of all students. This was changed to provide equity and excellence in education for all students. By saying close the achievement gap in the prior draft of the plan, we stated a goal that we can measure. The revised goal has no measurable outcome, and it just isn't the same, nor does it carry the same weight or expectation. The plan lists a goal of develop a comprehensive literacy plan for all students. And while I certainly support having a literacy plan for all students, the language of the goal does not hold the district accountable for any significant deliverable. Furthermore, several very important parts of the draft plan that the community saw before have been removed, and I believe their absence is significant and should be addressed. First, transparency as part of the vision statement in the prior draft of the plan has been removed from this draft. We heard from our constituents how much they value transparency of information. This is one of the things that I value very much in any organization. There was no feedback from any stakeholder stating that they felt that this should be removed from the document. I believe it needs to be retained as a vision for the district, or at least as a value for the district, as our constituents have clearly stated that they are extremely interested in this. Also addressing the needs of advanced learners was a part of the draft plan, with specific language committing the district to living out its 2017 plan to meet the needs of these students. I believe that the district should meet the needs of all students and have attempted to add back into this draft that we should meet the needs of all of our students by providing appropriate pace to all of our students, and that all students deserve direct instruction from a teacher. That language has not been added to this document. So I believe that the language of this present plan does not adequately reflect the strategic needs of the district and ignores some of the input that we have received from the community. Thank you.
I just wanted to push back a little bit on some of the comments you made, that we actually received quite a bit of feedback that the document actually read that it only represented the needs of advanced learners and gifted learners, and that we received overwhelming feedback that the plan did not, if someone did not have a gifted learner or advanced learner, that it did not feel like they were represented in the plan. So it actually was a deliberate decision to remove references to all learners. And the reason gifted learners aren't mentioned as a specific group is the same reason we don't mention Tier 2 learners, the same reason we don't mention Tier 1 learners. It's so everyone feels that they're represented in the document. And so it does not reflect that the board or administration doesn't have a commitment to gifted learners or meeting the needs of high-end learners. And in fact, we added the language you requested about pacing learners. Actually, we did. We added it to it was supposed to, because we talk about, it was supposed to be added to one of the outcomes, and if you're not comfortable because we don't add pace, I don't think anyone on the board has an issue with adding verbiage such as that, and that's why this is called a draft document. So if that is something that you feel strongly then we can communicate about things like that. I think the pushback was about the direct instruction, because I don't think that we have so many different types of instruction. I think that it's very hard as a district to guarantee that I think direct instruction can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And in my mind, that means one-on-one instruction. And so I think it's hard to promise that in a strategic planning document. So I think that when I hear as a board member, have I provided enough information to our superintendent so he can come up with tactics and he can come up with strategy, tactics and measurable outcomes? I rely on his expertise, that I have given him enough information, and I'm actually excited to make sure that hold him responsible for doing his job, but I personally don't want to do his job as a board member. And so it's his job to come back to us, and if in his tactics and in his measures, he does not give us what we expect, which might be a measurable outcome for a literacy plan, and it doesn't meet our criteria, then it's our job as board members to make sure that we provide him with that feedback, that was not what we expected. And so that is a back and forth process where we work with them to provide that input for John. So that is my feedback.
I'll echo what Julie said about thanking everybody and being very appreciative for the time put into the work. I am also excited about this draft, and I'm going to agree with Erica here, because especially, I'll pull out one example. When we put in here, provide equity and excellence in education for all students, we clearly communicated with John and made sure that that was to mean closing the achievement gap, and that the verbiage that would come from the administration would have reference to specific initiatives to close the achievement gap, stating closing the achievement gap, raising proficiency by X, all kinds of things like that. That's what we expect from him. And as Erica said, and I would agree, if that's not in the next iteration, I think we would all be pushing back on that. So as far as directions go, I'm going to agree that I'm comfortable with these directions.
We who were on the board prior to January 1st did indeed, thank you, Julie, put a great deal of effort into the strategic plan, and the composition of the board has changed, and so the mix of what we are requesting of the administration has changed, and there's give and take throughout the whole process. And in this particular case, with the language of the achievement gap, I'm satisfied with that, because I believe that the administration will flesh that out. There are a number of elements, give and take, that I could talk for a long time about, that I wasn't 100% behind. But there is one thing that Ellen brought up that I feel very strongly about, that we have surrendered, and that is that we have taken out the word transparency from the strategic plan. And many, we just did that this past week, and there's been many individuals who have called for greater transparency on the part of the administration, and that in particular, I'm sorry about. And so I would hope that we could reinstate it, but if we can't, there's give and take, and we have to compromise. And I think a very significant issue that we have is we have been working on this for so long, and I think we do owe it to the community to wrap this up as quickly as we can and give the administration a blueprint upon which to base their actions and strategic initiatives. So that fairly well encapsulates my overall perspective.
And I'll just note that I am comfortable with the broader directions that the current draft includes. I'm comfortable that administration is going to be the one to provide us with the means to achieve those directions. And I do think that it's the administration's role to come up with those specific tasks as opposed to the board. And so that's the primary reason why I am comfortable with the broader directions. In terms of transparency, I think that you heard the superintendent talk about having a data dashboard as one of the things that he was looking at, so that the concept that you're looking for, which is, are we going to have data available, is within the direction that we've included, and it is within what John understands we expect to see. So I don't see it as having left. I see the document going to a broader strategic level, and it's just a matter of who chooses the first draft of the tactics to get to those ends. And I believe that we should be looking to our administration and our lead team and our teachers to provide that first draft, and that would then come to us for approval.
I just have a couple quick, sorry, Janie. Oh, really fast, I just wanted to recognize that Miria Hansen is in the audience, and she's the consultant that has worked with us for a really long time. And I would just like to thank you. And as a board, I think we should recognize her for her hard work. So thank you, Miria, for being here. I appreciate your work on this as well. You've worked very hard and had some very tight turnarounds for us. So thank you very much. Really fast, I wanted to state I agree with Ellen and Owen about the importance of putting transparency in the strategic plan, but I got overridden at our meeting. So I do think that's important to explicitly state. And really fast, I think I'm very happy to hand this off to the administration so they can start working on their piece. If there are other small refinements that we need to make that people feel strongly about, and we need to bring up the topic of adding pacing, if we need to talk about transparency, it doesn't preclude us from doing any of that. This is not a final document. From my perspective, I think one of the most important things that we need to talk about as a board are what do we think are the key metrics for success as a school board we want, and then how do these things align with or eventually align with what are going to be the strategic plan outcome measures. How do we define the governance strategic outcome measures that we want to look at? And then what processes do we want to put in place for strategic plan oversight? Those to me, aside from making, having some conversations about things that we feel need to be revised and then working through the process of the implementation plan, to me that's critical that we have processes in place for strategic plan oversight. So I just wanted to state that.
And I would, actually, I agree with Julie that we, as a board, could hold another work session on this draft. I know that we want to finish this, and so that we can vote on this at our next board meeting or keep moving this forward. But I do think that there is work to be done on some of the wording that we've not even discussed as a board that might not be in the directives, but are stated at the top of underneath each of the priority strategies. There's some other more cosmetic things that we could talk about as a board with respect to this plan. So I would endorse another work session to talk about that.
My comment was just going to be around agreeing with you, both agreeing with you that the need for transparency exists, but also pointing out and reminding people that we did include in here verbiage that says ensure strong financial stewardship and provide information that is accessible to all members of our community and conveys the value of an Edina education. And that, I believe, was put in there so that not only could we say transparency, but we're actually have the ability to spell out what that looks like. We can't just say the word all transparency, because we need to really clearly define, the administration does, what parts are important to community members, what part of our reporting is important for transparency. And so I viewed it actually as an opportunity to go deeper than just saying the word and actually have a place to put what that information is. So maybe it means including that word in there somehow, but I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that the spirit of transparency definitely exists in the document. It may just be a wordsmithing issue.
Can I just add one quick thing onto that? I'm going to echo what Janie just said about that. That is 100% my understanding too. It's not to take transparency and the need to be accountable and responsible and hold everyone in the school district, including the board, administration, teachers, students, to a level of high standards. I think the conversation that we had at the work session, I thought it was more of a way to say it more proactively than reactively. And so I think transparency can sound aggressive when really we just want information. We want information to be clear. We want communication to be clear and fluid between the district and the board and our teachers. And so that's how I took it. So it's not, I think it was being a little bit misconstrued in this conversation. So I just wanted to clear that up. So we can talk about it in the work session too more.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Then I'll work with John to see and get the feel for the rest of the board if they want to have a work session and get back with everyone on that. Next up is a discussion on the enrollment report with John Toop and Mary Manderfeld. Are there any questions about what was presented in the packet?
You want us to come up?
Yeah, why don't you
Sure.
come up?
Do you care if Greg Desweiler, our Mars coordinator, joins us?
Not at all. Welcome.
Thanks.
So I believe this was added to the agenda so we could see the difference between the new enrollment report that John has put together for financial purposes and then the quote-unquote old enrollment report. And then if the board wanted to have a discussion about what they would like to see from an enrollment report perspective. I don't know if there are specific questions for the administrators that were up there, if we just wanted to have a discussion amongst ourselves about what we would like to see from an oversight perspective on enrollment. But I'll just open it up to board members for their perspectives.
First off, John and team, I'm a little bit confused because I have two enrollment reports. This was in our packet, and I think this may have come from you all. And then toward the end, under information, we have this board report, this enrollment report. And the January numbers say in this report that we're up 19 students. And in this report, it says we're down 4. Could you help me understand the difference?
Well, we did not do this. This report is one of the samples. This is what we have previously done. Yes, it's one of the two, what we've given to the board previously for probably decades. With John coming on board, he had a new report that he uses for financial purposes. So we decided at that point just to go with one report. Our numbers, so this does not include November numbers. We did not put November numbers in here. If you look at the report though, the financial report, we are up 19 students from December to January.
So I think the most challenging piece with this falls under the mobility area in that, you know, the timing for which we get these numbers, this data would only be, the snapshot in time would be from December 1 through 12/31. And so during that time frame, this is the snapshot, or this is the picture of what happened with enrollment. 12 students withdrew, 8 enrolled, which led to a net loss of 4 students. If we were to, you know, that's not to say that we couldn't go from, you know, when this particular report was run, or to the, you know, fulfill the whole window, we could definitely do that. I'm just following the steps of what has been done historically so that we create consistency with our data. But when I first looked at this report, I wholeheartedly agree that this mobility section in itself is probably the most confusing piece, and that the numbers never add up. And that's because from the time of January 1, when I ran this report, and to the middle of January, we will get notification from the sites that students either have left on their own accord, have dropped because of 15-day absences that are retroactive in the month of December. So it's not something where, you know, we don't have a crystal ball and can see that. We rely on, and it's not the sites that are sitting on the data, it's just the notification doesn't happen in a timely manner. And so the mobility information is for the complete month and doesn't accurately or fully represent from the November timeframe all the way through the December timeframe.
So there's a certain fudge factor because of late notifications, what you've just said here. And so there's a certain margin of error then. And any estimate on what that would be month by month? What percentage, if we have, you know, we've got a -4 here, how might that change with the January 15th numbers coming up in 2 days, is it? 2, 6, is it very volatile? Does it swing by 20? Does it swing by 1 or 2?
I don't know that it's that volatile. I honestly have never looked at it from that perspective because there are many other facets to you know, what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, month to month. So, I mean, it's definitely something we could look at.
One of the things we thought, if we are going to go back to this report, is maybe it would be helpful if we did a breakdown for where the students are going that are withdrawing and where the students are coming from. So, for example, on the report we have, of the 12 students that withdrew, 10 moved out of state, 1 transferred to a non-public, and 1 transferred to another Minnesota school district. So if this were a report that the board finds helpful, then maybe, and you're interested in who is coming and who is going and where they're going, maybe that would be a time to say, let's change this a little bit and provide, if that is something the board is looking for.
So if I compare this new report and I compare this old report, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like there's 2 pieces of information that are different. One is a year-over-year comparison, which compares December, I can't even remember what year it is.
2018 to
2019 to 2020, December 2020. The second is a breakdown by grade in school, correct?
Correct.
So if we add those 2 components to this report, it gets us this information that we're missing and what we're expecting. Why can't we just add those 2 components to this report and move on?
That's what the board wants to do.
So, and you were saying the 2 components would be, which one are you looking for?
Well, I compared the new report to the old report. And the concern was that we should go back to the old report. So I compared the old report to the new report and looked at what data was actually missing or different. And the 2 variables that I could see were the year-over-year comparison. So we could see student enrollment year over year. And so we could see a breakdown by grade in school. So my question was, if we added those 2 components to this report, it would give us the exact same information as the old report. And so I was just suggesting that we add those 2 components to this report, because I actually think that this gives us, the new report gives us better, more comprehensive financial information to track what is going on from an enrollment perspective, but then it would additionally give us those two components that are missing from the old report. So if we did that, we'd actually have a more comprehensive student enrollment report. And then we would see all of that monthly, and then we could move on with.
Except that those aren't the only two datas that are missing. So in the old report, the data that we were getting was that for each grade, we would know the total number of students who withdrew. We do not get that in the new report.
Isn't that what
We
the
don't-
monthly?
No, that's a net number. So for each grade, so the data missing from the new report is for each grade and for the total, the number of students who withdraw, for each grade and the total, the number of students who enroll, for each grade and total, the net total, the number of students who withdraw versus who enrolled. That's the bottom part of that mobility. That whole part that they were speaking to with respect to. So when you see the net, you don't get an appreciation for, you don't get a number. We don't know who withdrew. We just have a net number on the new number. And then the other data that is missing is the enrollment comparisons, present month, prior month, and year to the following segments, the pre-K to 5, grade 6 to 8, grade 9 to 12, and the totals. And then the enrollment by grade by school and totals. So there's quite a bit of data that we were getting and have been getting every school month for every year for the past 20 years. So this change means that the data that we were getting very consistently, and I feel that it's important as a board with oversight responsibility that we get consistent data so that we can compare our data from prior year's data. And so for the last few months, we have not been getting consistent data that we can compare to our prior years. I look back on Board Book, and Board Book online stops after 20 years. So I can't say how far more it is, but I really appreciate consistency in data. And I really appreciate, Mary, you mentioning what's going on, because in our September meeting, the board just said, we want more information on this. Are people moving out of town? Sure, let's just know what is the situation. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the transparency issue. I think that people make up all sorts of stories about what's going on in our district. They wouldn't make up these stories if we just were consistently giving them the data that they have always received. And I would recommend that we continue this report. If we wanted to add it, to be honest, the financial report is useful to John for his financial, but for me, actually, we get that number in the net number on the bottom line. Well, you're telling us the net number, so that information is given to us. I don't necessarily need to see John's budget report.
So how much more work is it to provide the new report and the old report as opposed to just the new report?
There won't be any more work for me.
Well, that wasn't the question.
No, I think if that is what the board desires, we can do both. Greg Gusweiler, Mars coordinator, pulls all the data. He provides the data both to John Toop and to Sarah Shandel to get it to you and to the community. And so it would not be any more work. The only month we did not provide this was last month. So again, October we do our annual report. And then typically you would have seen this in November, which you did not see. And now we're showing you a comparison of December. So we're missing the November date, but if the desire is to do both, then we would resume this effective in January, comparing January 19 to January 20, and then December of 19.
Right, so the question I always ask myself is the utility of the extra information and how much cost or time is involved in it. And so it's sort of a weighing thing. From my perspective, if it's nominal to create both reports and people want the extra data, that's fine. The fact that we've done it a certain way for a certain number of years isn't controlling for me because there may be a better way. And so, but in this particular case, it's just simply a question of, is it materially more work? And if it isn't, fine, we'll get them both, if that's what people want.
So I guess I would say on average, it's probably anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to put this together, check it, make sure that everything is accurate and labels are correct. And but it's, I mean, it's definitely not something that is, you know, a major task of mine. It's something that I do check and then make sure that I get it to Sarah on time. Just one comment about the numbers from this particular report is that if you look at the new report, the grade level breakouts are on there in the form of the sum of the grades. So if you look at kindergarten, first grade, as you go down the columns, you know, 578, 590, those numbers are all represented. So you're getting the same data in that report. You're really just missing the school breakout, the enrollment comparisons, and the mobility pieces. So those are, I mean, I pull the numbers, I send the numbers to John, I then construct this, run it through a couple of other folks in the enrollment center to make sure that I haven't made any mistakes, and then we send it off to Sarah Shandles.
So John and Greg and Mary, is there any time when the two reports could have inconsistencies, kind of what Owen said around margin of error, just because of how it's calculated in your office or recorded in your office, John, as opposed to Greg?
Well, there wouldn't be any differential for me because I'm taking that snapshot in time, like Greg said, of 8,322 students, and I'm just breaking it down by grade level. So I'm always going to use the number that Greg gives me for this report that you see. That's my report for financial purposes. So I wouldn't see that would be any variance on my part, but Greg may want to speak to variance on the mobility part.
I definitely think there is room for improvement on the mobility piece. I definitely think that's something that is gives you a better lens into what's happening within the school district as far as ins and outs. Now, whether the time frame for which we look at pulling that data we change, you know, that's one thing. Maybe looking at having real-time data with the dashboard that's, you know, in the future. You know, that's a potential possibility where we could set something up where looking at the last 30 days and 30 days into the future, you know, we have a DeLorean, we can hop in it and go into the future because we get the paperwork, we get the stuff from our families that are coming and joining us ahead of time. You could see that window, you know, the last 30 days, the next 30 days, what enrollment will actually look like. We can do that. It's just not on a piece of paper. This is, you know, that one point in time when we pull the data, and it's for that window. It's not for kind of an exaggerated window.
Well, I've got to say, I love the fact that there's both of them, and I love the fact that you've brought back the detailed report. And to Ellen's point, I love the granularity. I love being able to see what the breakdown by school is. I love seeing the mobility. It gives us an insight that the other report doesn't. It also gives us that historical perspective, and we can see what has been happening with the districts, with new programs, We have data hawks in the community too, who love being able to look back on this. And so it's not just for us, it's also for the community too, to know what this data is. So it's historical, it's granular. And so we have an issue here that we've got the two reports not squaring. Reality is not always simple, and so there's a reason why it's not squaring, and I'd be interested to know over time why that is, and they tell different stories. And we don't have time to go into it, but John, you're working up the numbers somehow differently, and it ties in with the finances of the district. And so I'd be interested, as time goes by, to learn what that is and why it varies with this. It tells a story. So I'm very enthusiastic about both reports. And Mary, I want to call out, thank you for giving us a report about the specifics of the students who left the district. I have one other question, and that is, when we see the differences in the mobility, is that a combination of resident and non-resident students? Okay, that's not broken out.
No, it's not.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Since it seems like it's nominal time, I hate to say 2 to 3 hours is nominal, but I think it makes the most sense to have both reports go forward unless anyone has an objection to doing that or any more questions. Does that sound okay?
Would it make sense for us to add to the report at the bottom where those students are transferring to and where they're enrolling from?
I would ask the same question as far as timing, if that adds significant time to creating the report.
Not a exorbitant amount, no. Because to do the mobility, I pull the data anyway. It's just analyzing the data in a different manner, so it's very nominal. We could also look at it from resident versus non-resident, you know, however you would like the data.
That would be super.
I would love it too.
I'm not sure what we agreed to, so you offered up a lot of things. So what did you say at first, Barry?
I think what I would like to propose is for our next, for the January, or for the February, is having this older report and then having at the bottom withdrawals, where they have went, you know, just those 4 codes. You can see transfer, non-pub, move it out of district, et cetera, and then where the new enrollees have come from. And so I guess I don't want to quite commit to breaking things down from open enroll to residents at this point. I think let's see if that additional data provides some good help for you and good insight, and then we can see if we need to break it down or provide more.
I think that sounds great. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next up for discussion are some student travel opportunities, and Brian Bass is going to come and present. So I'll give you a minute to come on up here. I'm sorry, and Principal Beaton is also here. Welcome.
Yes, Chair Allenberg, Superintendent Schultz, members of the board, community members still around. Excited to present 2 trips with Principal Beaton, and I felt that Principal Beaton would be best to speak to the background of some of these trips. So I've asked him to join us, and he graciously agreed to do so. So Andy, I will turn it over to you to provide a little bit of background to the Spain trip and the, am I pronouncing right, Guyana? Guyana.
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation this evening, Chair Allenberg, members of the board, Superintendent Schultz. I think one of the trips was approved through the consent agenda, which is an exchange tied to France. We kind of have some variability in the types of trips that we offer. The French trip that you approved is modeled similar to what we did with South Korea. There's a hosting piece of French students coming to the United States and being with host families in Edina, and those same students being partnered with the students in France in the fall, tied to MEA, and I think that's a piece that we did that was similar. The other trip to Guyana is Lindsay Smaka, who is our Fulbright Fellow at Edina High School, has led a few international trips through Operation Wallacea, which is an international organization that really is about sustainability. And they partner with professors and scientists around the world who are doing research in many areas where they're trying to preserve biodiversity, establish savannas, establish national parks, and so on, helping communities find ways to make income through the restoration and preservation of their communities and their natural environment. So in Guyana, this is again an opportunity for our students to work directly with these professors, typically from around the world, who are sometimes experts in their field. And so that will be the opportunity. Typically they have a camp-based experience. Sometimes there's an ocean-based experience. This is more a savanna and camp-based experience with these professors. They will be doing a number of things around collecting data. They do some of the grunt work for these professors, and then they also do lectures each evening from the professors. In each of these trips, they're credit-bearing trips with these teachers that they do work in advance of the trip, and then they do work with the trip, the professors from around the world, and their teachers, and then they do work when they return. So there's been previous trips. I was fortunate to go on one of these trips with Operation Wallacea to Fiji. It was an incredible experience for the students and the staff. And then Lindsay is continuing that path with the opportunity for students to go to Guyana. And that is a summer trip for the students. The second trip talking about is Chris Griggs, who's a social studies teacher that's embedded social studies, language, English standards into the courses. This is a trip to Spain. It again is another summer trip for students. The cost for the Spain trip is a little bit more based on a partnership with EF that we have, and they stay in hotels. So I think that's really the difference in cost between those. In Guyana, the students will be staying more in a dorm-like setting and camp setting instead of the 3- and 4-star hotels, and I think that's the difference in the cost. But again, all of our setup for these trips is trying to move from a simple tour to really educational competencies and work for these students to have learning and outcomes that they can have in elective credit when they return. So happy to answer your questions about either one of these trips.
Thank you for coming to present. Does anyone have questions or comments?
I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
How do students learn about the trips at the school? Like the French or the French trip, for example, is that only students that are in French language classes? Or how does everyone have access?
The French trip, I think, is more tied to language, and so students that are in both immersion French and non-immersion French are introduced to this opportunity from their teachers. Then they apply, they come to informational meetings. Some of the timeline about how it's rolled out in communication to students comes after this vote from all of you about whether it's approved, and you start recruiting students and providing information to students and parents. The sooner we can do that, which is why the policy provides the timeline, the sooner we can get out on fundraising efforts and so on. But typically is, if these are approved tonight, the science department and biology students will all be introduced to this opportunity. They can come to an after-school or before-school information meeting. They'll host some parent meetings. There's an application process for students that are interested in these trips, and that's pretty much how we've done it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
For the sake of the community, would you just do a quick refresher on if there are fundraising opportunities for the students and what those are?
It's built into the policy that there will be fundraising opportunities for students to offset a significant chunk of this trip. And depending on the student and how much they get involved, some parents write checks, other students write some of the checks on their own and put all their time into fundraising efforts. The exact fundraising effort is typically built by that teacher lead and the students themselves. So like Lindsay Smaka organized a 5K race as fundraising for some of her international travel efforts that has gone into a travel study fund. Our partnership with EF also has created a scholarship fund for us. So we're using them as a partner through their insurance, the organization of some of their trips, and they put some of that money back for us over time to potentially use for scholarships as well. So it's a combination of that fundraising, and then depending on what they want to do and how much they want to raise and how much investment that they want to do, the students really drive that fundraising with their teacher.
I have 3 questions, so if anyone else has questions, I don't want to monopolize the, okay. Do we know what the expenses are to the school district itself for administrative time for these trips?
I don't know how you calculate administrative expenses, you know.
Well, for like plane tickets and things such as that.
I don't know if you want to address that question.
So there are no administrative costs associated or applied to the district for any of the trips that are part of tonight's discussion or what was approved in consent.
And I think one of the things that we did change is previously in policy, there was kind of an unfunded mandate to have that administrator go. So you would have the teachers that would be there based on the chaperone numbers you needed, then an administrator had to go. Typically now, we just absorb that administrator that has to go on these international trips as one of the chaperones. So there's no cost to the district, it's all student generated.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, since I believe 2 of the trips, correct me if I'm wrong, are for school credit, are there any additional requirements or responsibilities from a compliance perspective regarding special education? And how do we ensure, since we have different requirements here in the United States than they do overseas as far as educational requirements, how does that process work?
Well, we have to provide that free and appropriate education for our students. So students on 504s and IEPs have gone on international trips before. I think the only barrier is a consultation with the family. If you're going to a situation where ADA is not in the same type of compliance in the United States, you have to be very honest about the opportunities, what's possible, what things would be excluded for some students based on just what's available, and then safety as well. So we're never in a position to deny someone an opportunity, and we will do everything we can to accommodate the students that have different learning needs or need support on those trips. And we have indeed supported students with IEPs and 504s on international travel.
Okay. My last question is around offering students opportunities that are more affordable, and we added to our policy language last year, trying to come up with a rotation that if we have an international trip, we're trying to offer something more local. And I was wondering if that has actually happened, because one of my concerns about approving international trips all the time is making sure from an equity perspective that we have other types of trips for students to get similar, like lab experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to be overseas. So has any progress been made in that area? And if so, can you let us know?
Yeah, and I think depending like the types of trips that we're offering, we're starting to have a little bit of a theme with these trips. The partner exchange between our schools, like we did in South Korea and now France. This science-based, field-based study that's happening with Lindsay Smaka. We are hoping to bring back what we had before with field-based study. Here that was regional. We used to have a long-standing field-based study to the boundary waters, but we had issues on policy and safety for our students and access to medical care, and we had to intervene and make a change. But we're hoping that's going to be coming back. We do have a national trip that's going to Yosemite. That is a national instead of an international trip that's happening coming up. Some discussions tied to a STEM-based trip that's going to Europe this summer, of doing one in the United States next year. Regional, I think, tied to mathematics and engineering type of trip that would be in the United States. So yes, we are aware of that policy, and this is our consult with these teachers that are the catalysts of this, and say, how do we offset even within the same year or every other year opportunities for students?
Do you know the estimated cost of the Yosemite trip?
Well, what's interesting is the Yosemite trip is, some of these trips that are national are just as expensive as some of these that we are proposing that are international. So it's comparable, actually, to what we're seeing for like the Guyana trip.
So I think that what we were hoping for is that we would have more affordable alternatives that, for example, if you can get a credit by going on the trip to Guyana, then how do you get a credit for a trip that's $800?
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. It's a valid question about, like, what was I talking about, the science-based, field-based study that you could do potentially in Minnesota, regionally, and so on. So yes, but we also have to have those leads of those teachers that are putting their time and sweat equity into organizing, building these trips. But yes, the discussions we're having with some of these key people that are our trusted, organized partners, the Lindsay Smakas, the Chris Griggs, those people, we are having those discussions about how do you build these opportunities either within the same year or every other year. So it's a valid point.
I think it'd be helpful from a governance perspective to, and not necessarily at a board meeting or whatever, but just to have a calendar or something that says, not that we're proposing a trip to Guyana and then we're also have this thing to Yosemite coming up, just so we can understand more from a broader perspective what some of the thoughts are around that. So, and I know we agreed in policy that only international trips need to come to the board, but that it also complicates it, because then if that's all we ever see, then that's all, it's sort of, you think that's happening. So it's more just like an FYI, this is what you're going to see to approve, but these are some other things going on.
Well, one of the things that could easily be done is, I mean, you could have a live calendar of things that we are organized, and you could just have a peek in anytime you choose to see what's there. You know, things that are happening regionally, nationally, that are not coming to board meetings, but you can see what's happening. But I know that we are trying to build with the spirit of that policy change to do exactly what you're asking for.
Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? Anyone? Thank you guys for coming and presenting the information. And finally up for discussion is Policy 601, led by Owen Michelson, who is our new chair of the Policy Committee. So I'll turn it over to Owen.
All right, thank you, Erica, and welcome to the Policy Committee, and to Julie also. We had a meeting on Wednesday to review a proposal before the board to effectively rescind the changes made to Policy 601 at the November board meeting. The 5K section, which would deal with advanced learners. And we talked about convening a committee. We didn't commit to this, but convening a committee later on to revisit specific aspects of 601, whether we need to have a gifted and talented policy specifically, and how the proposed changes would affect the district calendar and also the curriculum review cycle. So that in a nutshell is what we talked about, and we have a time now for the 7 of us to discuss whether we would like to make those changes or not. One thing I should mention too is that in order for this change to go forward, we need to have 2 board meetings where we have a discussion. We discussed it last week at a board meeting on Monday, and we'll discuss it tonight. And then we'll vote on the policy at the proposed change to the policy at the February board meeting. So with those introductory comments, I can turn it over to all of you and to me for discussion.
Yeah, the reason Policy 601 is on in terms of having the old policy language is pretty much to have a consistent direction. So under action, we've got Policy 601, which is to direct the administration to stay implementation of Roman numeral 5K. And so I had requested that if we're going to direct the stay of implementation, just so that we don't have this policy hanging out there with a requirement, but then a stayed requirement, that we stay it, which is our action item for today, and that then 601 is on to be brought back as the old version, just so we have a consistency in terms of what we've directed administration. So to me, the discussion is more driven by whether the board wants to stay implementation of Roman numeral 5K, because if it does, then again, I would strongly advocate going back to the old 601. If it doesn't stay it, then I'm not sure we need to discuss it. That's my view. And so I was going to hold my discussion of why I want to hold 5K till we get to that action item.
Right, I have similar thoughts. I don't have necessarily anything to say right now because it's more procedural, and I have more comments later when we're talking about the action item. So, but I want others to feel free if they have comments to make.
So I just want a little clarity on this is just for, we'll be voting on whether or not we want to stay this 5K.
Correct. Tonight's
And by staying that, you mean we will, bring it forward again for discussion later?
So we would, if the action item is approved, then we will direct administration not to implement 5K of policy 601. Then in the February meeting, we will adopt a different policy 601, and the stay will go away.
And the different policy 601 is the old policy 601, basically as a placeholder, so we can convene a committee to talk about revisions we want to make to policy 601. So we basically need the placeholder of the old policy 601 in place because it talks about graduation requirements and things such as that.
Right, and there's many items in 5K that we are currently doing. And that we plan to continue. When we heard from the administration, we plan to continue doing them. So I'm wondering if we need to scrap all of 5K, or if we just need to identify those items that are something that is not practical or feasible, given that it's January. So I'm just saying, I'm looking at it thinking, well, our current math curriculum that's not going to change. That item in this is what we're currently doing. There's many of these that I look at and I think, well, okay, all of the honors classes mentioned at the high school, except for language arts, they're all currently being offered. So maybe we don't need to get rid of the whole thing, and it would give the community acknowledgement that we really did mean what we said and that we were going to keep the current enriched classes and not totally change the way that we handle our gifted students.
I don't necessarily disagree with your thought process, but I think that even in keeping the language about the honors classes, there's a question about the fact that we don't currently call them honors classes, we call them enriched classes. So the administration had a question, and they were like, does that policy statement mean that in our course catalog we have to change the classes to say honors classes? Or does that mean that, so I think that even in something that seems so benign as that, they're complicated questions. So I don't necessarily disagree, because I do think a lot of it does state current stuff, but there are just nuances to it that brought up enough questions that I think that it's cleaner to tell the administration not to move forward. And I think John and I talked about bringing this committee forward next week, I think. Or, sorry, maybe 2 weeks, very soon, so that we can fulfill the commitment to the community that we will be talking as soon as possible about those things. The intent is not to bring forward some of these discussions and make sure that that we do our commitment to these families and stuff like that.
Well, so maybe then the thing, instead of saying stay and get rid of it all, to say beginning in 2021 for all of the dates that you're beginning, and then we'll have the time to look through and figure out whether or not this is going to work. I'm just saying, I mean, there's ways that you just rewrite this so that the curriculum aligns with a curriculum review cycle, so that it's not dictating that we have to act this month, which I understand the practical nature of running a district and needing to put changes this year. But if it goes out 1 or 2 years and we know that we are going to be reviewing this policy, at least the framework for this can then be discussed in a way that allows for all the items that have already been passed by the board to be discussed.
So, John, if we put a hold on 5K, you would still have authority to continue to offer the classes you're currently offering. Is that correct?
If you put a hold on 5K, yes.
Because you were offering those classes without that policy language.
No, I just wanted to say to you, Ellen, I think that we're actually trying to achieve the same thing, but the only possible way that we can try to write some of those things in is by actually staying it, because if we don't stay it, then the administration has to move forward with the things that they don't understand. And so the only possible way to give us the space to have those conversations is actually to stay it. And so that's the whole point or intent in staying it and then moving it into a cross-functional committee so we can actually talk about those exact things that you're mentioning. Is does it make more sense to write in language that says move the dates around? Like, is that the best way to approach this? Like, those exact things that you're bringing up, those are the conversations that we need to have. And the only way that we can actually have those conversations is to stay that part and to talk about it. But we can't do that, because if we keep it as a live policy, then it brings us, then we're in that conundrum where the administration actually cannot meet what the policy says if it stays as a policy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So I understand what you're saying about just change the date so it's not effective for a while, but then you've got this policy out there that, again, was created, from my perspective, without sufficient input. I would rather get the input and create the policy rather than have a policy hanging out there with a date that is triggered later on, and then we go change it. I think it's much cleaner to start at the beginning and say, we're committing to take a look at the issues that were raised by that draft, and then create a policy that addresses as many of those issues as consistent with the needs of all the students, rather than just put a new date in and have it hanging out there. It's just a perspective.
If we're talking about putting some breathing room into it and giving the administration some more opportunities to talk about it, then I wonder if instead of staying it, we talk about revising it, that, as Ellen was talking about, we relax the dates and we push things back a year or 2 or 3 or 4 in some cases. But that since we already have the policy in place and we've got the momentum, that we seize that and we simply revise it rather than stay it. So thoughts on that?
So it's not a function of breathing room. I have a fundamental disagreement with the way the policy came about, and a fundamental disagreement, or there's a lack of knowledge, I think, amongst all of us as to what the best approach would be to accomplish the goals. And so it's not a breathing room. It's really trying to set up a practice for implementing and adopting policies that's more consistent with past practice and more consistent with best practices. And I think the best way to do that is to stop the policy, commit to address the underlying issues that are raised in it in the way that's best and the way that is consistent with the way we've done things historically.
But just from a practical perspective, the challenge with what you suggest, Owen, is that the process of revising the policy requires us to take it, there's a timing issue with our course catalog. And so if we wanted to revise the policy, we don't have enough time to even meet to talk about revising the policy before our course catalog goes out. So the administration is under the policy that says you have to create these classes, and that's the policy they have to adhere to. So without giving our administration direction, like official direction that you do not have to adhere to this policy, that's the only official way we can give them breathing room and us breathing room to actually revise the policy. So it's also a procedural issue that we cannot, we literally can't have our next policy meeting in enough time to give them direction because of the course catalog. Does that make sense?
I'm picking up on the spirit of what you're saying. So then I might ask if we revise it and we hypothetically push everything out to 3 years. I'm just speaking hypothetically here. If we push it out to 3 years, the administration wouldn't have to seriously entertain anything immediately because nothing would come up in the curriculum cycle. So that's, I guess, where I'm coming from.
Can I add something in? I know this is kind of jumping ahead about the discussion, but one of the things that we have talked about with the strategic plan, and we have proposed districts strategies that we've laid forth, and they're proposed, but one of our key priority strategies, and it's a commitment from this board that we have talked about, is advanced academic excellence, growth, and readiness, and that includes a differentiation as one of those strategies that we just laid out and that we presented tonight. So I think from an effective and an efficient standpoint, it makes more sense to take the direction that we all agree to and all the work is behind from a strategy standpoint and build out the policy and the classes based on that. So a consensus from us all as a board, clear direction to the administration that, that this is a priority. And so I don't think holding the policy out kind of in space. I think that doing the strategic direction as the driver for this policy is the way to approach it. I think it's a smarter way. I think it's more efficient. It's more cost effective. It's using resources wisely. It's all the things that we're expecting from the administration. I think we owe it to make very clear in our commitment and also the direction. So I don't know, that's how I see it. I see it as part of the bigger picture. And then we can answer some of those questions that are outstanding about cost and implication and impact and identification of gifted students and all the different pathways, so all the different moving parts. So that's what I'd like to do. I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying about aligning with our strategic plan. My concern is, though, that the two items that I spoke to that had changed, conceptually, big changes from our original draft that the stakeholders all reviewed and the draft that we have just agreed to, is the item that deals with the things in 601. And the things in 601 really state that we believe that all of our students should have the curriculum and pace and challenge, but also instruction. That's what's in here, that they are going to have a teacher that will be teaching them. And when I could not get the board to agree that direct instruction would be in part of that strategic plan in that one item where we had reduced all of those other words, if you look at the original draft of the strategic plan that went out to stakeholders to the one that we have now, it was differentiation for all students. So I understand that advanced learners should be treated the same as other learners, where they should have a teacher teaching appropriate pace and challenge to them. So one of the things about what that 601 is bringing out is that there is some reluctance either in the board's ability to acknowledge that there should be appropriate pace. That was kicked out of the strategic plan, and that it should be taught by a teacher. So those are the things that I'm responding to, and I know that I'm just one voice. I'm listening respectfully to you all, and I understand that you may disagree with me, but that's how I feel that all students should be treated.
I just, again, have to push back on your comment where I don't disagree with you at all about how our advanced learners should be treated. What I disagree with you about is that we, in a strategic plan, should call out the needs of advanced learners, because I believe that if we call out that advanced learners deserve direct instruction and that advanced learners deserve pacing, it does, to me, it raises the question, why don't our special education students deserve that? Why don't our students that are performing below grade level do that? And so I absolutely 100% fundamentally believe having students that actually are advanced learners, myself, that they deserve to be at the correct pace, they deserve to be challenged at the appropriate level of rigor, they deserve to be in classes that are meant for them as advanced learners. Why would I not want that for my own kids? I want that for all the kids in our school district. So to say that the board does not want that, I think is fundamentally incorrect. To say that we want our strategic plan to reflect the needs of all learners, I think is actually more accurate. And so I'm sorry that you feel that way, but it certainly does not reflect my feelings as a board member. I don't think it reflects the feelings of the other board members. I think we disagree on semantics and what the semantics make you feel like. I certainly would hope that the community would understand that when we say, for example, in one of our main strategies, that our hope as a district that all students receive the level of curriculum that they need, that and the appropriate level of learning that they need so they can achieve their personal growth, they can move on to the next level, that they understand that we mean every learner. We mean advanced learners, we mean kids that are middle of the road, we mean kids that are below grade level, we mean kids that are special education. Every learner that walks into every school here in Edina deserves rigor, pacing, and to be in classes that make them feel that way. And so I'm frustrated that you keep saying that we do not support that as a district, as an administration, and as a board, because that's not true.
Well, actually, I never mentioned administration or district, but I did at our last work session try to amend this strategic initiative. The strategic initiative read, provide a differentiated educational experience that effectively engages and appropriately challenges every student academically. That does not talk at all about only for the gifted. Doesn't even say gifted, doesn't say advanced academics. So when I tried to change the words on this to say, provide, I added the word coherent. Thank you, board. You agreed that that would be appropriate. I added the word coherent, and I wanted to add the word at the appropriate pace and taught by a teacher. And I couldn't get that in there. Pace was rejected, and so is taught by a teacher. I think that for me, and for what I know is one of the most important things is relationships with a teacher, that being taught by a teacher and having this differentiated educational experience, to me, that means that you're going to have those experiences with a teacher, not with technology, and I just wanted to make sure that that was in there, and it wasn't. It doesn't say anything about advanced learners. This is what we want for all of our students. I don't know why it would be so hard to put that in there, when in fact, when you read that, and you would read it and say, provide a coherent and differentiated educational experience that effectively engages at the appropriate pace with a teacher and appropriately challenges every student academically, I'm not saying.
So Janie, I think you wanted to
Yes,
comment
so-
that I think we've strayed off our discussion, which is policy 601. And if there are issues with the strategic plan, we can discuss that in a work session. But the semantics to our strategic plan are a different discussion.
Okay, I will hold my comments till, okay.
Feel free to comment.
Okay, so I'm also going to push back a couple things. One, we did take out the word pacing because in the conversation, we talked about how engaged, coherent, and appropriately challenging implies pacing. It cannot be coherent, it cannot be engaging, and it cannot be appropriately challenging if it is not paced well. We could put in probably 10 more things, and I think we specifically took out pacing because it is implied in that, and we were trying to open the door for more specific tactical things to come from administration. I think that when you talk about wanting to, you're agreeing that the verbiage in the strategic plan is that it opens the door for all students, and that is what we want. Therefore, to have a policy on our books that is only specifically talking about advanced learners is very contradictory. And I think we heard from educational leaders that said, we need more time with this, and we aren't sure this is the best way to address the outcomes that you want. None of us here up at this board, besides you, John, are licensed educators. We have to rely on the staff that knows what they're talking about. We, as a group, I feel very passionately, I am all for meeting every single student that walks into our doors where they are at. That is my 100% sole purpose in being up here, is to give every student what they need to succeed. That includes gifted learners. That includes all learners. If we want that, we have to go about it in the right way. And we heard from our professionals that the downstream ramifications of this policy could potentially and would most likely interrupt that experience for other learners unintentionally. I'm not comfortable saying that that's the right decision then, and I don't think other people are. So staying this section so that we can have the time to make sure that we are doing it right for these advanced learners. We want that. Everybody wants that. We just have to make sure that other learners' experiences are not compromised with this policy as well. So I just want to say that I'm sorry, I'm feeling very passionate about it because I want what you want. I just want to make sure we do it in the right way. I think we all want the same outcomes. I just want to make sure that we are doing it in the way that our educational leaders are going to support this decision. So thank you.
Okay, so one of my other comments that I made before this was passed happened to do with the main goal of this is, are we meeting the needs of our students? And I had asked at that time if we could survey our students to find out whether or not they feel that providing honors courses would best meet their needs. And I think that asking the students is an important part. Asking the students and their families is an important part in the next step. So if it appears that the next step is going to be a review over what would be the best thing for the district to do in order to meet the needs of their students, I would suggest that part of that process is to talk to all stakeholders. And so if we are only talking to administrators, that is not going to be adequate. From what I'm hearing is there were several parents who came and spoke, and I think that that's great, but I do want a survey to go out to our stakeholders that are the ones that are currently attending classes and or that would be choosing, would they prefer to have a choice between an honors class or not an honors class? That's the type of question that I think would be appropriate.
I have one final comment to make, and I think that we are all seeking pretty much the same laudable goals of meeting all kids where they're at and giving them the best educational experience that they possibly can receive from us. I think it's a matter of balance and perspective and what we're emphasizing. And the arguments I've heard that raise the issue of how urgent this, how the time pressure this would put on the administration, and unknown questions about implementation, I think those are reasonable questions. Then why do I put my emphasis, why do I put the balance on if not staying or revising or rescinding, but maybe changing the deadline? Why am I putting that emphasis there? And I think a lot of it is that we made a commitment to the gifted and talented community 3 years ago as a board, that right around now, most of what 601 5K has in its language would be implemented by now or would be well on its way to being implemented. So the argument could be looked at the other way, that we've had plenty of runway to do what we've been doing, and as a body, we made a commitment 3 years ago to do this. So we haven't done that, and I think that that weighs on me as well. So that's the last comment I have to make, and we probably have to move on at some point here.
Thank you, Owen. I appreciate everyone's input, and I know this is a passionate subject for everyone, so I appreciate the conversation. That concludes the discussion portion of the agenda. We're going to move to the action portion. We have 4 items up for action tonight, starting with budget parameters. Do I have a motion to approve the budget parameters?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
John Toop, do you have anything to add to the information that was presented last month regarding the budget parameters?
Just a couple of items to add. Based off of our Finance Committee meeting for the board, we just added in red anything that had changed from the budget parameters from the previous set of parameters that was used the prior year.
And it looks like we already have a question, so.
No.
Oh, your microphone was on. So, that's okay. Now you have to come up with a question to ask. Does anyone have a question or anything they'd like to discuss regarding the budget parameters? No? Oh.
I actually did have a question, but number 10, the district participates in a third-party billing program. I don't think I quite understand what that is.
Yep, that is the medical assistance reimbursement that we get through Department of Health and Human Services.
So are we generating revenue off of that?
Correct.
Maybe I'll have to talk with you offline about that, because I can't. Could you maybe give me a 1 or 2 sentence high-level explanation how we generate revenue from that?
I might have to defer to Mr. Jorgensen on that.
I think we, oh, goodies here. I don't need to dwell on it.
Third-party billing revenue is generated because the Department of Human Services gave us authority to bill for specific services on a student's IEP that are considered medical in nature. So services such as occupational therapy time, speech and language therapy time, or physical therapy time are all those services that will typically fall under a medical related service. And we bill, for parents that give us permission, we can bill DHS for those services for students that are on DHS type services.
Okay, that was the next question. It's DHS. All right, perfect. Thank you.
Great. We'll now vote by roll call to approve the budget parameters. Aye.
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 The budget parameters are approved. We're now moving on to renovation recommendations. Do I have a motion to approve the renovation recommendations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
John, is there anything you'd like to add to the information regarding the renovation recommendations?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair Allenberg, this is the second set of bids. If the board recalls, we had our first set of bids at the last board meeting on December 16th. Those bids were approved in the amount of $18,898,380. They're about 75.5% of the estimated total of a little over $25 million. We had some bids, as you see in front of you tonight, that we still had to look at and analyze. Those are in front of you tonight. And the one thing that is left after this would be the fire protection. If you recall, we rejected that bid at the December 16th board meeting, so we are still going to be rebidding that, and that those bids come in on 1/16, so shortly here.
Are there any questions from the board?
So how do the bids relate to the estimate that we had done beforehand?
The estimate that we had done beforehand, I would have to get that from Wold and Kraus Anderson to give you that number, Director Friedman.
Okay.
I can get that for you if you'd like.
Just normally, I mean, we've had a good string where a lot of them had been below, so I was just wondering if the absence meant the contrary.
Yep. Oh, perfectly good question. I can get that number for you.
And is it possible for us to get a drawing too?
Yes, I know you had mentioned that before, Director Jones. I did talk to Buildings and Grounds Director Eric Hamilton about that. I believe they are working on that at Wold so that you can see something, but I'll reconnect with him.
Yes, and Ellen, just so you know, John and I already talked about a process and the best way to show the whole board the renovations, and so we'll be,
As soon as we get from Wold.
yeah, so we'll for sure we'll make sure everyone gets to see those, so. Are there any other questions or comments? We'll now vote by roll call to approve the renovation recommendations.
Allenberg?
Aye.
Fox? Aye. Green?
Aye.
Jones? Aye. Michelson?
Aye.
Shaw?
Aye.
Wallen Friedman?
Aye.
Okay, the renovation recommendations are approved. Next are policy updates. Up for action are policies 528, 602, 605, 609, and 623. Do I have a motion to approve policies?
So moved.
Oh, I don't have to read the book.
Well, you paused. I thought maybe you'd be done. I moved to accept the policies listed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Owen, would you like to start us off in the conversation about the
Absolutely.
policies? Thank you.
Absolutely. We have 5 policies we're reviewing, and we are reviewing them for an eye for clarity and for compliance with state statute. We have only 2 of the 5 policies that we are looking at any changes on. The first policy that we're looking at is 528, Student Parental, Family, and Medical Status Non-Discrimination. This has a lot to do with Title IX compliance and compliance with the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And we have only one change to this, and this change is in letter F of section 2, that the school board designates the assistant superintendent to be the Title IX coordinator rather than the human resources manager. So that's the only change there. Then we have policy 602, which is the organization of the school calendar. This basically deals with the arrangement of the school calendar, and now more substantively with the e-learning days. We have 3 changes here, actually, and I'll take them in the order that they appear in the policy. The first is that we will modify our policy from a 6-month rolling cycle to a 12-month rolling cycle review, and that all of the student schedule changes will be subject to review by the school board itself. That's the second one. And the third is much more substantial, and that is e-learning days. This is to comply with state statute. And the state statute permits us to have 5 e-learning days. And substantively, it lands on concepts such as what do we do with students without internet access, what sort of notification do we give parents at the beginning of the year, and also prior to the actual invocation of a e-learning day, and that the teachers need to be accessible by phone or by intranet on e-learning days. So that is that policy, 602 with changes. And any questions?
You had said it has to be approved by the school board.
I can
I
read
don't
the.
see, yeah, where is that in this policy?
602, section 4D, proposed changes in the student day schedule shall be subject to review and approval by the school board.
Right, and it's not in the board book. D isn't. So I kind of remember that. I remember when I was on the policy committee when that came out.
Yeah.
So I remember that being in there, and so it's not inherent. No. No.
Okay, maybe what I did is I pulled this off of the notes from the policy committee itself and not. It's supposed to be taken out. Okay, so it wasn't struck on.
Why?
It's because it's competitive with the line above it.
If you look at A, the superintendent will be responsibility. Well, why is it? Subject to review by the school board. Do you want to turn your microphone on?
In A, it states it's subject to the review of the school board. So that's why you struck that, because it already stated it, is that right?
Okay, I stand corrected because I see
it's
what's in the
different.
board
It's
book.
not, it's different. I mean, it's
Yeah.
subject to the review, or it's by approval. So it's.
Okay.
There's a difference between the board approving versus the board reviewing.
So I
The
guess.
other wording was part of the MSBA model policy. That's why it was proposed to be in there.
Okay, so I think the question before us is, I think I made a rookie mistake. Sorry about that.
No.
I drew from the wrong source.
No, well, and this is not critical, and
So what's in front of us, though, just to move us along, is strike what I said about 4D. It's not in here, but and let's just, 12 days is still in there. And we are striking the language, necessary revisions in a previously approved school calendar will be made by the school board in a timely manner.
Right, my recollection was that we agreed to strike that because it was redundant with. Right, A.
but it's not.
So I guess the question is for the rest of the board, do you want to put that language back in and bring it back to policy committee, or are you okay with the revisions as listed in the policy, the revised policy?
I'm okay with the revised policy.
I'm okay with the revised policy.
I'm okay with the revised policy.
I am too.
Okay, so I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the The other policies are unchanged. They deal respectively with alternative programs and services for students and meeting their needs with alternative programs. We also discussed 609, which is religion, boundaries of religion and its integration into school. We're making no changes there. And 623, parameters of student attendance during the summer school hours. We made no changes, and these are all in compliance with state statute and court interpretations.
Great, thank you, Owen, for the review of those policies. I just want to open up to everyone if they have additional questions or comments. No? Great. We'll now vote by roll call to approve policy 528, 602, 605, 609, and 623. Aye.
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 Policies 528, 602, 605, 609, and 623 are approved. Finally up for action is placing Section 5K of Policy 601 on hold and directing the administration to convene a cross-functional committee to review Policy 601. Do I have a motion to approve placing Section 5K of Policy 601 on hold?
So moved.
Second.
Lenny, do you want to lead the discussion on this action item?
Sure, we've kind of go over this a little bit earlier with the discussion on revising policy 601. So, and my views haven't changed since last week on this particular item. I do think that we should put the implementation of Roman numeral 5K on hold. And there's a number of reasons. So we're always supposed to be looking for what's best for all of our students. And because we didn't get administrative, teacher, and as Ellen pointed out, student input, I don't have any assurance that this policy, in fact, is in the best interest of all the students. And so I think it's important that we go back and get input so that we can figure out what's best for the students overall. The other issue I have is there are words in there that are unclear in terms of their meaning. And I'll give a couple examples. At the last meeting, there was a discussion about whether the elementary schools, all elementary schools must have a pullout. And so the board members disagreed about whether all the elementary schools needed to have a pullout. And if we're sitting here disagreeing on a policy that's been adopted, that's a problem for administration to be able to implement it. At a prior meeting, there was a discussion about what certification was necessary for teaching gifted students. And there was a last-minute change to that with no definition added. So that's sitting out there as an ambiguity. The policy requires substantially different classes, but doesn't define substantially different, leaving the administration to try to figure out what a board direction means. And I think that's inappropriate. I raised concerns before about not being able to complete it in the time frame that's listed. The result in scheduling changes at the middle school, loss of the middle school model. We also don't have evidence that this policy addresses a need that's more important than other areas. So I think that what was pointed out is that there are inconsistencies in the way we deliver services, but those inconsistencies don't translate into a greater need for this policy as opposed to some other strategic policy. In fact, this policy, I think, was directed towards advanced learners, but our data says the advanced learners are growing at a better and more consistent rate than our other learners, implying that we should be looking at policies that are looking not at advanced learners, but at the rest of our population. I didn't see a lot of big community support for the change. I know that there was emails sent out asking community members, a couple hundred community members, to come and comment on this in favor of it. And we got about 20 people showing up. I do think it's important, as a number of people have said, that the strategic plan should create the direction that policy follows, as opposed to policy creating a direction for the strategic plan to follow. Basically, I disagree that this is the right approach. I do think that from what administration has presented, that there are better ways to meet the needs of all of our students, as well as better ways to meet the needs of our advanced learners. And I give an example, the compacted science class in the middle school, to me, is a huge plus for our district that I'm not sure is viable if we continue to set up a battle between regular and honors. So I just think that we need to step back, get input from administration, and understand what's sort of the best steps moving forward, and then if it needs a new policy, adopt a new policy consistent with where we're going on the strategic plan. And that's my comments.
Thank you, Lenny. I'd open it up to everyone else for any comments that they might have.
I don't want to repeat what I had said earlier, but I do think it's really important that we look at this policy with a wider lens. I already mentioned aligning it with the district strategic plan and guide for our administration and our teachers to make sure their voice is at the table with decisions. Something else is in our work session tonight, we also heard that the new state language arts standards are going to be voted into law in just a few months. And it prompts the start of a process in a 6th to 12th grade language arts design team. And that design team led by Teaching and Learning and our teachers. I would think that process would be thorough and intentional for all of our EPS students and using data and research and best practices to lead to important course and curriculum recommendations. So this would fall under that, Policy 601 falls right under that category. The other thing is I think it puts the fiscal responsibility of the changes in line with the curriculum review and what would be expected. And then third, as Owen mentioned, there is a commitment to having a committee that is made up, that is cross-functional, that we can address 601. And I think that's super important that we give the time and space for that discussion and to make sure all voices are at the table. And that's all I have.
Julie and Lenny, you made reasonable arguments, and I think what I wanted to do is just reaffirm that why I am taking the position I am is that I sense that we have a commitment to make to the gifted and talented community, and the spirit behind my desire to go forward with the policy is a good faith effort to meet all the kids where they're at. And I think none of us disagree with that. It's more of an issue of procedures and means. But there's an urgency to it, and that is that the composition of our students in Edina does differ from other districts in many ways, in that we have 50% of our students at over 80%. This is a significant issue, and we have a whale-shaped distribution. 25% of our students in the last survey of why folks were leaving because of absence of gifted and talented instruction. We talk about voice and choice. This gives the students the voice and choice to choose certain enriched courses or not to have an enriched course. It has an effectiveness to it. It's ground in research, and I mentioned the last, I think it was November, December, the North Carolina study. There's a 100-year longitudinal study, the Economist article. There are other positions too, but it's well grounded. I'm not overwhelmed with the success of embedded honors that we've seen in LA 10, and then we're not reinventing the wheel because pretty closely to what 601 5K has in its language, the district largely had in place before we had our last strategic plan. So this is not unique to the district. It provides us with consistency in our enriched and course offerings in the middle school, and also a little more consistency with our neighboring districts, which have a more robust, gifted and talented set of offerings. I think it's economical. It's not as sweeping as it has been depicted. We were talking about some minor changes with the elementary school, only 7 classes in the middle school and high school, and Amir's estimate of about $200,000 seemed pretty reasonable to me. It's also financially beneficial because it's attractive and to students to families to retain and attract students. It's not tracking. One of the biggest arguments against this sort of thing has been that it's tracking. Tracking, as it has been historically understood, is dictating that students go into the vocations. And we're not talking about that at all. We haven't talked about it here, but it is an active term in the community and among among some faculty members, but I have no interest in anything close to tracking. I would like on and off ramps, and I think this provides quite a few of them. On face validity, I think that separate classes with separate curriculum makes a lot of sense. And I don't talk about it very much because I'm not a licensed teacher, but I've taught in many instances. Most significantly, I taught as a contract instructor at the Science Museum of Minnesota. It just actually wrapped that program up after about 30 years this fall. Everyone's going online, but it had adult stand-up computer training, and I taught everything from Intro to Mac and Windows to high-level networking, operating systems, and programming languages. And I found that in my own classes to have a big spread of ability was very difficult to teach to. And so I can't imagine how that wouldn't be the case with junior high and high school, middle school and high school students as well. So I think we have done the district a service here and the community a service by robustly talking about it here among the 7 of us. And so I think we can just take a vote and move ahead unless anybody else has some other comments.
Thank you, Owen. I appreciate everything you've said, and the only thing I just want to push back a little bit on is I think we have to be careful when we talk about data, and that when you say 25% of families and students that left the district for gifted and talented is putting that in perspective, and that we have very small data samples, and that equaled, I think, 8 or 9 families or students. And so 25% sounds a lot different than 8 or 9. And I just want to make sure that when we're presenting it to the community that people know the scope of what we're talking about. And then the other thing is, and it's absolutely your opinion and you're entitled to your opinion, is that I do think that we offer a very robust gifted and talented program, and it doesn't mean that we can't do more and that we shouldn't be looking at it and seeing other ways that we can offer gifted and talented offerings. For example, I would like for us to look to offer it in younger grades and things like that. But I do think that there could be certain districts that do offer more things, but there are a lot of districts that offer a lot less than we do in Edina Public Schools. And so I think we need to be, I personally as a board member just want to acknowledge that we do have in my perspective, very robust gifted and talented offerings. I think one thing that we have not done well is explain clearly what our gifted and talented offerings are, and all the different ways that we do challenge advanced learners and what offerings we do have at the secondary level for advanced learners. And I think there's always been this presumption that we're Edina, so we don't have to articulate what we do. And I think that we do. We need to very clearly articulate what we're offering, what we're planning to offer, ways that we can further challenge learners. And I think you and I talked about it, but just so the community knows, what are our plans for the future? And so people aren't wondering, what are we planning on doing? So where are we not meeting needs? And acknowledge there could be ways we're not meeting needs, but we have a plan to get there. And I think that's a very important thing to do. So I just wanted to talk to that. I don't really have much to add because I think that we've talked about this quite a bit, and I appreciate everyone's input. The only 2 things that I wanted to add to the conversation is I actually think that I'm actually excited about where our district is, and as opposed to rehashing everything that I think is wrong about the process and that I don't like about the policy or that, I want to try to move us forward in a positive direction. And I really think that our district is on the precipice of really being able to offer a lot of interesting, challenging, rigorous opportunities for a broader cross-section of students than we've ever been able to. And I say this because, unlike a lot of districts, we just this year piloted 2 different ways to challenge learners, a compacted class and embedded honors. And we don't know if they work or don't work, but the fact that as a district, we've taken it upon ourselves to see if embedded honors can provide a more rigorous experience for more students, I think says a lot about our school district. So at the end of this year, we'll have insights into whether these classes work, whether they don't work, whether we can repeat them across other classes. How can we find the most ways to challenge the most learners, to meet learners where they're at? And I'm talking multiple pathways. I'm talking about multiple ways, pacing, compacting. I think the notion that we as a district are trying to dial back these things, it upsets me, because I think we're actually, between all of these pilots we're running, our strategic plan, the curriculum rollouts, I just think we're so well set to do so many exciting things to meet the needs and challenge our learners. I think it's an exciting time to be in our district, an exciting time to be an educator, an exciting time to be an administrator. And I think it would be an exciting time, not that the students are in the know, but to be a student, because we can meet more needs and we can challenge learners. So I'm really excited to be part of it, and I just want to try to move forward in a positive direction as a board and as a community, and bring our educators in, our administrators in, our students in, and make the most of this opportunity that we have. So that's all I have to say.
I'll be real quick, I promise, since I already said a lot. I do want to acknowledge, recognize, and appreciate the commitment that we did make to parents in the gifted community. I do want you to know, Owen, and I want parents to know that I recognize that, I appreciate it, but I hope that those parents would recognize and appreciate that we want to go about it in the right way. And we need the best information. Like Erica said, we have a robust program. If I, as a parent of a gifted student, I would be remiss if I didn't say I'd be very interested in saying, how are we set up to be innovative in our way that we deliver curriculum that could meet the needs of a gifted student and give them more real-world application, right? We talked about interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary classes. I think we need to hear from more educational leaders about what the possibilities are. Because the possibility, when I think about that, when I think about innovation and possibilities, I personally don't think about going back to the way things were. And I want to hear from them whether that's right or wrong. I respect and acknowledge what we want to do for all learners, but we have to respect and acknowledge from the multiple populations of learners too. And I hope that parents will recognize that we just want to go about it in the best way possible for students, so that one group of students' experience is not compromised by another student. So I want to acknowledge to you and to the other parents that I do recognize that, and I want to do right by them because I think it's important.
It looks like we're going to be moving toward forming a work group. And one of the things I think is really important is that this be done in a very fairly quick timeline. So I don't know what how the rest of the board feels about this, but this shouldn't be lingering out there. People are watching. And they're watching and they're listening and they're trying to see which direction this board is going to take the district. And I feel very strongly about meeting the needs of all of our students. This is going to, it's going to end up being a bit of a look into what was promised in 2017. And it's going to look into how are we serving all of the students. I just spent the morning at a meeting on universal screening given by the Department of Education, and I learned quite a bit about the needs of it was a talk on equity and how you provide equity in gifted programming. And it was really clear from that meeting how much is needed in terms of identification, universal screening, speaking of the earlier discussion, nonverbal universal screening. Because once students are identified, and they can be identified, there's going to be a talk on this on Thursday at the MSBA conference, given by a different district who will be talking about their experiences with their immigrant students, that the only way that one teacher found out that they were gifted was through a COGAT test. And then there are other comments about how using these universal screenings will identify not just the gifted students, but it will identify traits for all students. So it's not just a test that benefits only certain students, and that first and second grade teachers are finding that those tests are very useful in their classroom. So there's a lot to talk about when we open this door. And as we open this door and start talking about it, one of the most important things that I feel is that we need to remember about this excellence gap, that when we are developing talent, we need to develop talent in all students, and we need to be very intentional about that. Otherwise, you will never see the types of growth in your programs in advanced learning in all segments. So I feel very strongly about that. But I also feel strongly that by getting rid of programs, or by somehow by reshaping programs, you may not be delivering the equitable objectives that you think you are, because certain segments, just as we heard in multilingual learners, they do best when they are targeted in groups, not mainstreamed. So these are big topics, and I just want to mention that if we're opening this door, looking at the different pathways, trying to figure out what acceleration looks like, but also honoring the fact that we have been told that we are keeping our enriched classes, and that those classes in 601 were not defining curriculum. They actually could include any of these real world at an accelerated level. So I'm just saying, yes, we should do all this. It should be timely. We should definitely ask the students. I think that also we should ask the teachers, not just administrators, but teachers. And as we do, I want to make sure that we are doing this that would honor everybody's anonymity. And I'm just saying that because I just want to make sure that the information we get back, coming from from administrators, teachers, and from students and their families, that they can be totally candid about the experiences that they are encountering. Thank you.
So I appreciate everybody's comments. I definitely agree we should be timely in moving forward. I just want to make a couple notes that this is not about not giving students choice. It's about stepping back and working through the various choice options that are available. So in terms of embedded honors, we don't know yet if it works. And so I think it's premature to judge it. Same with compacted. And so those are potential choice options that may be better than dictating that we have irregulars and honors. The other thing that I haven't said before, but I've thought about a number of times, which is the board approved embedded honors as a test, as sort of something to roll out and try. And we told teachers that if they devoted the time and energy to putting together an embedded honors class, we would allow it to roll out and we would test it. And so an issue I have with the policy is that it doesn't allow that test to go through. And so I think as a board, if we make a commitment like that one, we have an obligation to follow through on it. And so that is one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing, which is, so what's the feedback we're going to get on the work the teachers have put on with our approval? And it, you know, it wasn't Julie and Janie, but it was this board that approved going forward on that. So to me, that's a critical piece that I haven't mentioned before, but it is important to me as I look at it. But again, for the community, we're looking at ways of providing multiple choices. We're not trying to restrict. We just want to step back and say, what are the various choices that are the best overall? That's it.
Can I make one more quick comment too? Sorry, because I do think it's important when we talk about talking to administrators, talking to teachers, talking to students. I don't want to miss also, and I think this primarily relates to the English classes, I don't want us to forget about hearing from teachers about whether this is, what is the right path for those students who are not our gifted. You know, we heard from parents that maybe having a separation of some classes, like you said, could be beneficial to learners who are struggling. So if we're going to go back and have these questions and do this the right way, I just want to make sure that we do not forget to include conversations about that so that we're hearing from all sides of it. So.
And I want to correct something. 601 did not say that we would be ending embedded honors.
It specifically called that out as not satisfying the requirement of an honors class. And the idea of the embedded honors was to see if it would provide the rigor and pacing that students wanted. And so that implicit in not satisfying it is, in my mind, brings an end, could have brought an end to embedded honors.
But that wasn't the intent. So that's how you read it, Lenny. But to be, I just so I'm setting the record straight. The policy calls for 2 classes. That's all.
Right, and embedded honors was pursued to see if that would provide the rigor and pace. And the policy 601, in calling for separate classes, essentially said that the way to provide that rigor and pace is through the separate class and not through embedded honors. And everybody can go read the policy on their own and have their own interpretation of it. And I appreciate that your interpretation differs from mine.
Right. Well, and just, I mean, honestly, the reason that I'm saying that is I don't know if embedded honors is going to work or not. I actually have a completely open mind to that class, and it may actually bring a number of students into testing whether or not they can operate with honors ability and give them the confidence and readiness to feel that they are able to take the next level of class. That does not, that's a completely different thing than offering a total honors level class. So an honors level class option really is a different type of class. And whether it is taught at a grade level above, as we do with our math classes, or whether it is just taught at a continual pace and with teaching at that level for, gosh, I hate talking in front of the board. Anyway, it was not meant to say we don't think that there is a place in our curriculum for pre-AP 9 or 10 with embedded honors. That wasn't that was not the reason for that.
So I just want to tell everyone that I appreciate the respectful and robust discussion between everyone. That was not being sarcastic. I was being honest. And I think we can now move forward with the roll call vote. So we will now vote by roll call to approve placing Section 5K of Policy 601 on hold and directing the administration to convene a cross-functional committee to review Policy 601. Aye.
Fox? Green?
Aye.
Jones?
No.
Michelson?
Nay.
Shaw?
Aye.
Aye.
So placing Section 5K of Policy 601 on hold and directing the administration to convene a cross-functional committee to review Policy 601 has been approved. That's all for our action items. So I wanted to see if there were any leadership updates or committee reports.
Yes. Thank you, Board, for passing our legislative platform. Anybody who is still awake and listening to this meeting can look at the consent agenda and read it. It's very exciting. And we are holding a legislative breakfast on January 21st at 7:30 a.m. The breakfast is at no cost to the district. It is being provided by donations, and don't expect much, but I mean, when it's called breakfast, it's not really, but it will be nice. And our state legislators will all be present, and we will be presenting our legislative platform, and there will be time for our legislators to tell us about their education agendas for this legislative session, and there'll be a question and answer time. So it is in room 170 here in the Edina Community Center, which is downstairs, and I encourage everybody to go and get involved and advocate for our public schools.
Great, thank you, Ellen. And I did want to quickly publicly recognize Ellen and Owen, and I see Sarah back there, and all the members of the LAC for their hard work in putting that forward. I know it's a lot of work. So I know myself and the rest of the board do appreciate all your work on that. And then I also, really fast, I wanted to publicly recognize Sarah Shandel. She was gone all last week, and if anyone didn't realize, she's the glue that keeps the district together. In her absence, I think we all realized how important you are to our district. So I just wanted to thank you for everything you do for our district. So thank you, and please don't ever take a week off ever again.
I don't think it was quite that.
So if there's nothing else, I wanted to thank everyone for attending and viewing online. And unless there are any objections, I will adjourn the meeting. Great, thank you.